The story begins with the boy kneeling before the saint and asking her for help. He promised to give her whatever she asked for, so will she be able to give it to him? The guy wanted to get that one and only chance to be there and help her. When she turned 24, our heroine moved to another reality. She did not understand where she was. In any case, after waking up, it became clear that this was a different world. She immediately noticed a different hair color and different clothes. As soon as she turned to look back, she noticed a whole bunch of people in front of her bowing to her. One of them turned to the girl and said that he was glad to welcome her God's grace. Our heroine, of course, did not understand what it meant. Having got here, she became Saint Emilian. Even with her acting talent, it wasn't easy to become a saint in one day. However, learning from her own mistakes, she has been able to hold out here for 6 months now. To some extent, she was recognized as a saint so she could freely visit the palace. Our heroine suddenly realized that she just wanted to walk in the garden, so she came earlier, but on her way she met the Duke's daughter, Lunella Nestro. The girl, perplexed, asked her interlocutor if he was telling the truth. Next to her, it seemed, was the son of some marquise. The guy was telling Lunella that it was not hard for him at all. The kind and beautiful famous daughter of Duke Lunella Nestro. If this world were a novel world, she would definitely be the main character. At first, Emilian even envied her because there were always many handsome men around her. But now, she is very glad that she did not fall in love with one of the men who were hanging around her. As a result, we have the main character who is being offended. Following her is the main character who is eternally in love with her and runs after her. And of course, the saint, who lost her head over the main character who would soon turn into a villain. Although she has a lot to learn, there is no time to think about men when she is busy with work all day. In any case, what is most important is that the difference in the behavior of men with Lunella and with our heroine was noticeable to the naked eye. Love and recognition directed at one person, so Emilian didn't expect much since their attention was not focused on her. In the end, the Marquise's son gave the girl something that made her incredibly happy. She promised that all expenses would be reimbursed by the duchy. The guy said in surprise that it was not worth doing because it was a gift from the heart. He immediately handed her the book. However, Lunella Nestro said that this will not work. This must be paid for without fail. But she was still very happy. She also said that she would soon have a meeting with the crown prince, so she didn't know how to leaving Mr. Itoa. The guy immediately became embarrassed. Our heroine laughed and couldn't believe her eyes. Were they really flirting? However, at that moment she noticed a very suspicious look from Lady Lunella. Our heroine recognized it instantly. A very surprising pretense, or rather acting. It all seemed to be just a wonderful performance. One way or another, our heroine turned around and went about her business, even though this whole situation was very interesting. After some time, the girl greeted His Highness. The man told her to sit down. Emilian was surprised. He invited her himself, but in the end, he didn't even say hello to her. The guy stuck his nose up in the air just because he was a prince. However, the crown prince of the Vesaloil Empire, Casadora Macron Vesaloil, told our heroine that he wanted to talk to her. The girl said that she listens to him. To herself, she thought how handsome he is, but unfortunately, he doesn't have the character. Casadora Macron reminded her that there would soon be a hunting competition that would be hosted by the imperial family, but after that, there would be a banquet, and he would need her help. Emilian immediately assumed that someone was forcing him, at which point the guy said that because Nella insisted he wanted her to take part. Nella. That's what they affectionately call the Duke's daughter. In any case, it was necessary to listen to him. Emilian asked if she could find out the reason for the help. Casadora Macron told her that it was his guess, but he had recently reported to the shrine that the number of monsters had increased. Since the competition will take place in the large forest territory, there is a high probability of encountering monsters. Nella is worried about him and wants the saint to be nearby. Our heroine said coldly that she understood him. However, does his daughter truly love the Duke if she cared about even such a person? Although she immediately remembered how Lunella Nestro had flirted with that man a minute ago. In that case, what if behind that sweet and innocent smile there are actually some insidious plans hiding? Casadora Macron suddenly said that he knew very well that she did not visit such places. However, he asked that Lady Nestro's wishes be respected and his invitation be accepted. Seeing Casadora Macron smile, our heroine was shocked. Does this man really know how to smile? Emilian sighed heavily and said she was willing to take part. In that case, he said that their conversation was over. She could go because Nella should arrive soon. Strangely, right after meeting the Marquise's son, she decided to see the Crown Prince. Anyway, Emilian smiled at the prince and said goodbye. However, the girl looked to the side and sadly thought about how unfortunate it was that she would not be able to meet Lady Nestro's entire harem. Suddenly, the thinker of the Halo Lastuan Empire approached our heroine. He was glad to meet Lady Emilian. The girl smiled and said it was mutual and then asked in surprise if he was really going somewhere. The guy said that Lady Nestro had called him. Our heroine immediately decided to try to touch on this topic. She said in surprise that she had a meeting with His Highness. Did something really happen? Halo looked at her in horror, not understanding whether this was true or a joke. The girl told him that she had only invited him. Emilian immediately assumed that he had been screwed too, but decided to calm him down, saying that there was some kind of problem. In any case, I felt sorry for the guy, but now everything became clear to Emilian. The image of the innocent, stupid girl Lady Nestro, who everyone around her fell in love with, was just a mask. Halo Lastuan, meanwhile, began to move away in bewilderment, and our heroine whispered to herself that she was very surprised at how she pretended to be nice. Much more interesting to watch than a truly kind and sincere person. All this was amusing. Already in the evening, our heroine was thinking about the hunting competition. Is the Duke's daughter worried about her men, or is she planning something else? Suddenly, our heroine began to feel an unknown pain and writhes from it. Soon she fell asleep because she remembered this feeling. It was the future that God shows her, the so-called prophecy. Just a few hours later, Emilian jumped up in horror because she was perplexed by what she learned about what would happen at the competition. There would be a monster. The action moves to the next evening. People at the fountain were talking about different things. One way or another, there were even conversations about rumors. As it turned out, 5 monsters had already been spotted in Sarthyun County. The man asked if the Count and Countess were okay. The interlocutor answered him that, fortunately, they managed to settle everything in time. The knights used the commoners as bait and defeated all the monsters. It was thanks to this that the county got away with no casualties. However, the people who made the bait for the monsters died. Anyway, one of the men laughed, saying that this was what he expected from the Count. Destroyed the monsters and got rid of the pathetic commoners. Excellent strategy. Our heroine was perplexed by the world in which such actions are praised and admired. Emilian didn't really understand why she ended up here and became a saint. She sits on the bed again, thinking about what she saw. She had the dream a second time. The prophecy speaks of monsters appearing. Monsters are beasts of chaos, so they are dangerous to humans. However, they have one weakness. This weakness is divine power, so it is the sanctuary that is responsible for their extermination. Anyway, the problem is that there is too little information about these monsters. The prophecy did not say how many monsters there would be and what level they would be. If it was a low level, then even ordinary knights could handle it, but monsters above the average level could only be killed with divine power. She immediately wondered if she should report the prophecy so that the hunting competition would be cancelled, but if she did, the aristocrats would use bait again. She couldn't involve people in all this and let it happen again. The girl was sure that these freaks wouldn't cancel the tournament just for this reason. In that case, she decided to observe first. Either way, she was glad to have been invited to the event. At that moment, a guy knocked on Lady Emilian's door and said that it was Lenavin and he was already back. The girl got out of bed and went towards the door to open it. She understood that it was time for dinner. Opening the door, she saw Lenavin, who was the high priest, standing in front of her. The guy welcomed God's grace. Our heroine greeted him and said that she thought he would be late because he left in a hurry. Lenavin said that he could not disobey her order. However, Emilian that it was not an order at all. In any case, it was correct. She asked to follow her to the dining room. Already walking along the corridor, one could notice how Lenavin often glanced in the direction of Emilian. Eventually noticing this, the girl decided to turn around and ask what happened. The guy immediately turned his head away, apologized, and said that everything was fine. The girl was of course surprised, but didn't attach much importance to it. Emilian decided to change the subject and asked where he went during the day. She noticed that he looked very worried when he came to ask permission to leave for a while. The guy admitted that Lady Lady Nestro had called him to her and offered him and the thinker to take part in a hunting competition. Emilian had fully expected this. Anyway, she said she was glad it wasn't serious because she was beginning to worry about him seeing how he was hurrying. The guy admitted that Lady Nestro had never called him first and he probably just got nervous without even noticing it. Emilian couldn't hide her smile from the realization that Lanella had even charmed the high priest. Our heroine decided to say that she would also take part in the competition. Despite the surprised question from Lenevin, our heroine thought about who would ultimately become the only winner who would be able to win her heart. The action moves to the next day to Emilian's office. She was told that Lady Lanella Nestro had come to see her. Our heroine asked in surprise what the purpose of the visit was, to which the maid replied that the lady said that she wanted to meet with her. Emilian was very surprised that the Duke's daughter appeared so suddenly without even warning in advance. In any case, she sighed heavily and decided that she would still listen to her, so she asked her to take the lady to the living room and make tea. After some time, the girl finally appeared in the passage and with a sweet smile told God's grace that she was glad to greet her. Lenevin bowed down in embarrassment, and our heroine told the lady that they had not seen each other for quite some time. The girl said that she didn't want to take up her precious time with her sudden visit, but she needed to discuss something very important. Emilian asked if it was personal, and then immediately decided to let Lenevin go. Lanella Nestro screamed and said that it was not necessary to do that. She started to say that this was a very difficult topic for her, but she would feel better if Mr. Lenevin stayed nearby, so she asked to leave him. Our heroine immediately noticed the falseness in her words, but accepted her request, so she asked Lenevin to stay next to Lanella Nestro. The guy came up to her and handed her a handkerchief. The girl thanked him and said that terrible things had been happening to her lately. That's why her eyes were wet. The girl with tears in her eyes began to talk about how someone had recently started threatening her. Emilian, perplexed, asked what she was talking about. Lanella Nestro said that when she went to tea with Lady Charonde, she suddenly found a whole bunch of her knights killed. Our heroine asked again in surprise, and the lady continued to say that strange things were happening around her. Things would go missing from her, and sometimes she would even wake up in another room, but none of the maids saw or heard anything. Here our heroine could not understand what she was hearing with her own ears right now. Is Lanella Nestro showing her acting talent again, or is she telling the truth? One way or another, the girl ended up with increased security assigned to her, and her father was very worried about everything because the criminal had not yet been caught. The girl cried and clasped her hands, asking the saint to help her with this. Our heroine sighed, thinking that if she was informed about the prophecy with monsters, then she should take on this too. The girl asked how she could help. Lanella Nestro cried out in disbelief, asking if this was true. Emilian said she would agree for a couple of days. She would be responsible for her protection and finding the criminal. In that case, the lady said that her father would be diligently engaged in surveillance. There is no need to worry about that because she needs protection. Our heroine took a cup of tea and said that she would come to the duchy and take on this matter from tomorrow until the beginning of the hunting tournament. Lanella Nestro was incredibly grateful for this. Soon Emilian asked Lenevin to escort the lady to the exit. Soon the guy led the girl along, but at that moment our heroine still saw that very smile from Lanella Nestro. Our heroine could only laugh at this because she was amused by such acting. The action moves to the next day. At this time, a carriage was driving to the duchy. Of course this carriage belonged to our heroine. Lanella Nestro met her and began to thank her for coming. However, the Duke and Duchess of Nestro asked their daughter to be more polite. The woman greeted the grace of God, saying that she was glad to meet them. Lady Nestro also began to talk almost with tears in her eyes about how happy she was and how excited she was. Our heroine turned to the Duke and said that God would bless them. She did not know that they would decide to meet her all together. The man said they had to do it because Nella had traveled so far for her safety. They asked her to make herself at home. Immediately, Lanella Nestro took the saint by the hand and invited her to go inside. The girl assured our heroine that while she was visiting them, she would take good care of her. After some time, they finally reached a corridor along which they were moving somewhere. Looking around, our heroine said that this is how she imagined the estate of Duke Nestro. This family is indecently rich. However, the girl still decided to look at Lanella Nestro and thought for a bit. The girl noticed someone looking at her, so she turned around and asked Emilian in surprise if she wanted to ask her something. The girl said that she looked completely different. Lanella asked what it meant, and our heroine said that yesterday she looked too desperate. The girl thanked for her concern and said that today she had a saint next to her. That's why the girl felt safe next to Emilian. Our heroine said that she was very happy about it, but still it was a complete lie, and even her tears were an act. In any case, she doesn't understand whether there is any truth in her tales. Judging by her parents' reactions, this is indeed a cause for concern. Well, or maybe she really was threatened with something and she saw this as an opportunity. Lunella Nestro suddenly asked the saint if she wanted to have lunch together. Our heroine understood that she still had time, so she would learn about everything slowly. She agreed to the proposal. After a while, the girl was sitting at the table and eating lunch with a beautiful but up-to-no-good girl. Not a bad evening. Somehow realizing that there were no men around her, she was now feeling rather bored. In any case, she decided that she would have to make plans for next time. Suddenly, Lunella Nestro raised her head and coldly asked the saint why she was so active. Our heroine was horrified by the change in voice and the atmosphere that had arisen, so she even fell silent for a while. Nella suddenly said that her voice sounded strange, so she asked not to misunderstand. She asked out of pure curiosity. Looking at Emilian, the girl said that she was too different from the previous saints. Our heroine heard these words quite often. When she first came into this world, the saint was treated well, but in turn the attitude towards the sanctuary was terrible. Since people were endowed with divine power from birth, they possessed excessive kindness. In other words, they were never in a favorable position. Even if someone took away their share, they put up with it without speaking out against it. By her standards, the life of the sanctuary was somewhere between abstinence and poverty. Unlike previous saints, she began to improve the system in the temple. Our heroine said that she had answered this question several times at the meeting. She hoped that it had been clarified, but apparently Nella had not heard it yet. The girl said that this was all for the preservation of the sanctuary. The saint was chosen from outside to prevent the dark future of the church. Emilian nodded her head and said that it was absolutely true. Nella continued saying that the sanctuary was flourishing now, but the saint still acts like she's missing something and wants to know what it is. Our heroine thought for a moment and soon said that she agreed. Greed took hold of her. Anyway, she raised her glass and said that if she continued to try hard, then things will get much better soon. She took a sip shortly after. Lunella Nestro clapped her hand loudly but quite calmly and soon sat silently. The action moves to the day of the hunting competition. Today, our heroine's work to protect Lady Nestro has finally come to an end. Lenevin smiled and said to God's grace that she had done her best. Emilian replied that she had seen nothing that could threaten Lady Nestro. The high priest asked, "What about the Duke's investigation?" Our heroine said that they hadn't talked about it, but judging by the atmosphere they had reached a dead end. In the end, Lunella Nestro made her worry about the murder, and her reaction was strange. Emilian could not leave this matter alone. The girl said that they needed to send a priest to help them with the investigation. At that moment, all the ladies exclaimed in surprise. The reason for this was the carriage from which the handsome Prince Casadora Macron began to emerge. All the girls started talking about how handsome and charismatic he was today. Emilian just snorted, saying that his carriage was shining from miles away. Soon after the prince, Lady Nestro followed him, to whom Casadora Macron offered his hand. People instantly changed their admiration to shock because they couldn't understand how this was possible. Emilian laughed at this. At that moment, the girl jumped out of the carriage and, seeing a friend, immediately ran towards him. Looking at Anessis, she told him that she was very glad that he came here. This guy was Duke Anessis Kazian, or childhood friend of our lovely lady Lunella Nestro. You can see from his eyes that he is in love with her. If you count the thinkers standing over there were already 4 men gathered here who were interested in Lady Nestro. Emilian decided that she had to be vigilant, but she was still very interested in watching. Suddenly, Nella saw the saint and cried out joyfully. All the people started to whisper in surprise, "Who is Emilian?" Noticing her pink hair, they realized that she was a saint, but they did not know that she visited such places. People decided that she was close to Lady Nestro, and our heroine decided that this girl was attracting everyone's attention. Emilian smiled and greeted the lady. At that moment, Anessis came up to her and reminded her about the scarf. Lunella Nestro told him that she had just prepared it. When knights go to war in the Empire, the knight's beloved gives him her handkerchief. With this, she blesses him and wishes him to return victorious. Lunella Nestro held up a scarf and said it had embroidery in his favorite color, Anessis. She asked him if he liked it. The guy smiled and told her to tie the scarf on her wrist. he definitely wouldn't go anywhere from here. After this, our heroine turned her gaze to the crown prince and found a similarity in the fact that there was also a scarf on his sword. The guy approached Duke Cajan and said that all preparations were finished, so it was time to move. He gave the girl a demonstrative hug. Soon the boys headed forward with Lanella Nestro waving and wishing them victory. Emilian also wished them a safe journey. His Highness the Crown Prince said that he would return soon. Anisis, bowing his head, thanked the girl for her wishes. The action moves forward some time. The stately princesses communicated with the Duchess with compliments. Our heroine in turn stood on the defense. At that very moment, loud screams and incredible shortness of breath were heard from behind her. Turning around, she noticed a knight in front of her who had fallen to his knees and was calling out to the saint in horror. Emilian approached him and asked him to catch his breath, and soon asked what happened. Finally catching his breath, the guy said that his highness had been attacked by a monster in the forest. Our heroine was incredibly terrified. There was a moderate panic around this news. However, our heroine was perplexed and asked how this had happened. Monsters. She said that they should have avoided casualties altogether. The knight apologized and said that the signal fire simply had not been lit. Emilian looked down and said it wasn't his fault. She hadn't found any traces on her initial inspection, so how did they appear? The guy said the monster was supposedly above average. Many went to the scene, but most were injured. Emilian asked to give her the exact location because she needed to send reinforcements there. However, at that very moment, someone began to shout in confusion and stop Lady Nestro, who was heading into the forest. Our heroine instantly clicked her tongue and asked what was wrong with this girl. Where was she running? Not understanding what was happening, the girl decided to run after Lady Nestro. She ran and assumed that Nella would hardly have run there without any thoughts. Could she really have trusted her to protect the rear? Emilian still didn't know, but she understood that the lady was clearly counting on something. Suddenly, our heroine stopped because a strong smell of blood hit her nose. Meanwhile, Lady Nestro sat next to the prince, asking him to be patient for a little while because the saint would soon come and the monsters would be killed. The guy smiled and told her that only she had come at such a moment. Lanella Nestro asked him with tears in her eyes, who else if not her? The prince said that everything was fine. Emilian, noticing the prince, was glad because at least he could speak. However, at that moment, the guy heard a strange rustling sound behind him in the bushes, so he immediately turned around. With all his might, he threw the dagger which cut Emilian's cheek and soon became embedded in a tree. The guy himself was scared, and Lanella Nestro was perplexed and at the same time joyfully screamed. Anyway, the lady asked to heal his highness. Our heroine said it would take a moment. Having started to treat the crown prince's wounds, she was even surprised that he was still conscious with such injuries. However, she noticed that the recovery was very slow, which meant suddenly Lady Nestro's voice was heard from behind, asking why it was healing so poorly. Emilian explained that it was because of the monster's poison. The wound was starting to open up despite her using the healing power. Anyway, she said that she had given him first aid, and that once the poison was completely out of his system, he would feel better. First, they would need to... The saint did not have time to finish her plan of action, because at that very moment, she heard and soon saw a huge monster behind her. The crown prince immediately stood up and asked Lady Nestro to step back. However, the crown prince was also asked to stand behind him. The boy was surprised. These words came from the mouth of Emilian, who told them that she would protect them. Then the girl looked at the monster's secretions and wondered, was the prince really injured by this acid-like poison? The monster's body was full of injuries from the battle with the knights, and its speed was slow. Was it tired? Our heroine had never encountered a monster above a lower level before, so she was worried, but she thought she could handle it. At that very moment, a pile of poison flew past Emilian, who was taking off her gloves. The girl knew for sure that if it hit her, she wouldn't be able to handle it. She was lucky that she managed to dodge it, but if the monster surrounded her, she would be finished. At that moment, she began to examine the giant, wondering if he had any injuries incompatible with life. Soon, she noticed one. Right now, it was the right time to attack when the monster had not yet decided on its target. As she began to use magic, her hand began to glow. The girl understood that she had only one chance. At that very moment, she began to attack. Shortly after, there was a loud explosion, followed by a flash. As soon as the prince raised his head, he noticed a monster with a huge hole in its body in front of him. The guy covering Lady Nestro with himself looked at the monster in surprise and asked if he was dead. Our heroine kicked him to check and immediately said that he was dead. She was worried that he would smell the blood, but it was still good that the monster did not focus on it. In this case, the girl approached the prince and, holding out her hand, told them to get up. Lady Nestro reacted instantly and turned the attention to herself, saying that he would help Prince Casadora get up. At that moment, our heroine looked at her hand and thought about how long it would take her to wash all of this off. Suddenly, the crown prince grabbed her hand and said that they had to go. Emilian was surprised by this, but she said she agreed. Nevertheless, it was all strange. He was supposed to be wiping away Lady Nestro's tears, but then why did he ignore her? At that moment, our heroine heard screams behind them. She remembered the people who were fighting the monster, so she immediately called out to His Highness. The guy didn't give a sign the first time, so Emilian repeated it but louder. The prince turned around in surprise and asked what happened. Putting on her glove, the girl said that there were still wounded there, so she needed to leave. Lady Nestro looked out from behind Casadora Macron in surprise and told the saint that she had to heal His Highness first. Emilian, knowing the rules and values of this world, understood this but still told them to go back, because there would be priests waiting for them who would help. However, the guy started to say what he wanted, but at that very moment, Lady Nestro started to say that they needed to go back. If he gets sick, she'll suffer. She said he shouldn't like it when she gets hurt. Emilian wasn't even surprised that in such a situation Lady Nestro didn't stop playing. While the girl continued to cry and ask His Highness to come back, our heroine turned around and wished them luck, and she left. In the end, Prince and Lady Nestro turned around and went their way, but the guy still looked after Emilian. Soon evening came. Because Emilian brought many priests, the situation was quickly brought under control and there were no casualties. Now our heroine understood that she had stayed to cure the prince poisoned by the monster's venom, but still, at that moment, the bewildered cries of Enesis were heard, asking Nella if she understood what she was doing. The girl looked at him in bewilderment and asked why the hell he was yelling at her. Looking at these two, our heroine couldn't even understand why the situation turned out this way. A minute earlier, our heroine was telling the crown prince that she had done everything she could at the moment, and besides, the wound had already healed. Only because of the poison remaining in his body will he feel pain. But this pain will go away and get better over time, so there is no need to worry. Lady Nestro asked in surprise if her power was not enough to remove all the poison from her body. Emilian said that it would take too many victims. That's why she said that, being a saint, she couldn't allow the prince to lose consciousness from unbearable pain. In that case, the guy also agreed. Our heroine suddenly told him that she would advise him to visit the sanctuary for some time. If he were under the shade of the healing tree, he would recover faster. However, she noticed that he was thinking, it was not surprising since he did not want the imperial family to be indebted to the shrine. Overall, he looks healthy, so he should do it himself. At that moment, Casadora Macron said that he would do so. Our heroine was very surprised by this answer, so she asked if he was serious. The guy said it was true, and then asked what the problem was. Emilian said it was fine and then asked Lady Nestro to help His Highness. They needed someone to look after him while he was going to the temple, and she more than anyone else was concerned about his well-being, so she was the right person. Lady Nestro immediately said that she agreed it would be an honor for her. She would really like His Highness to recover soon. In that case, she said that he would soon recover. The guy said thank you in a drawn-out voice. However, she asked to thank not her but the saint. She would be near him so that he would not get bored. Emilian noticed that she was still skillfully pretending. Does she really want to strengthen her position next to the crown prince? This is the question our heroine asked herself. Everyone knew that Casadora Macron would become an emperor in the future. But if she married him, she would no longer be able to dream of the harem she now has. Maybe this girl wants to have a blast before her wedding. In that case, it would be a shame if, at that moment, Enesis burst into the room. Lady Nestro looked at her friend in surprise. The guy started yelling at her and asking what she was doing. Did she understand it? The girl asked why he was shouting, and Enesis asked how she could run away into the forest all alone. What if something happened to her? Lady Nestro told him not to shout, and then said that she could not sit idly by while His Highness found himself in such a situation. The guy started saying that priests were supposed to come to the rescue. Lunella Nestro grabbed the saint and said that she believed that she would come for her. Our heroine did not understand why the situation turned out this way. Emilian, in any case, told Duke Cassian that His Highness needed peace now. Enisis immediately bowed and apologized to His Highness. The prince said that it was not worth doing. He himself was surprised to see Nella. By this world's standards, Lady Nestro's behavior is not to be condemned because she rushed to help the crown prince of this empire himself. But still, the fact that Duke Cassian was so angry meant that he was very worried about Lunella's condition. And by the way, she was sure that the Duke was jealous because he was the crown prince. Besides, these two were also tense. At that moment, a woman entered the room and told the saint that His Highness's guard had arrived. That was good. Our heroine then told Lady Nestro that she was leaving the care of His Highness to her. The girl immediately grabbed the saint's hand and asked her to wait. She said that if Emilian didn't mind, she would like to return with her, as she was grateful to her for saving His Highness. Our heroine asked again in surprise. In her head, she wondered why Lunella did not want to be alone with the crown prince. Immediately, Emilian turned her gaze to the prince, who also looked at her. Soon he turned his head and asked the saint to do as Nella asked. Of course, our heroine was very surprised by this, but she still agreed. Lunella Nestro happily began to say how happy she was about this. Already in the carriage, the girl assumed that the saint was tired, but still she did not expect anything else from her. She is the grace of God. Emilian said that she could not act differently. The lady suddenly said that in fact Enisis was right. In that situation there was no point in going alone because she would have simply died. She began to say, embarrassed, that she had hoped and prayed until the end, and yet as if by a miracle she had appeared. For a second, Emilian seemed like an angel to her. Our heroine smiled and told her that it was her debt. In any case, Lunella Nestro said that she owed her and thanked her again. By the way, she said that if she needed help from the Nestro Duchy, she could contact them at any time. Emilian was glad about that. However, it was incredible. Lunella Nestro's performance was simply incredible. If she hadn't noticed the hostility on the very first day she arrived at the Duke's estate, she wouldn't have realized now that all her words were lies. Lunella Nestro suddenly said that the banquet was also cancelled because when something like this happened, it couldn't be held. Emilian heard that she had prepared everything for the banquet, so she understands her sadness. Sighing, the girl said that it was so, and her brother was supposed to come. She had a lot of plans. Emilian asked which brother she was talking about. Does she really have a brother or an heir to the duchy? If you think about it, our heroine only knows that he is studying abroad. Lunella Nestro said he had to finish his studies and come back, so she asked if she could invite her when he arrived. She explained that they were planning a family get-together, so if the saint took part, the regret about the cancelled banquet would immediately disappear. However, our heroine said that she would be uncomfortable attending their family event. Lunella said that everything was fine and that Enisis would come too. Only, as Emilian could see, they had just had a fight, so she wasn't sure if he would want to come to her. In turn, our heroine, on the contrary, thought that Duke Cassian would still appear to make peace. In that case, she thanked her for the invitation and asked if she could come with the priest who was helping her. If it was Lenaven, Nella would be only too happy. The lady was busy with the prince and duke today, which made Lenaven seem desperate. It would be interesting to see him try to stand out at their family dinner. At that very moment, Lunella Nestro asked the saint if she knew that her brother was a magician. Suddenly, something flew into the carriage and broke the glass, which flew into the salon where the girls were sitting. Our heroine covered Lady Nestro, but did not understand what was happening, why the carriage was attacked so suddenly. At that very moment, an unknown guy approached the carriage. Could it really be he who attacked them? At that moment, the guy just looked into the carriage in surprise and suddenly said that he had found her. Emilian still looked at him and did not understand who he was and how he dared to attack the sanctuary carriage. However, at that moment, the guy's face changed in surprise because he was not ready to see a saint inside. He asked what she was doing here. Our heroine screamed in bewilderment and said that this was the sanctuary's carriage, so it was logical that she would be in it. Was his answer satisfactory? Soon the girl asked to be allowed to ask her a question. She wanted to know who he was. However, she felt like she had seen this man somewhere, a face too familiar. One way or another, she asked whether it was he who had attacked the carriage. The boy lowered his head guiltily and said in a quiet voice that it was him. At that moment, Leonela Nestro was finally able to open her eyes. At that very moment, she jumped up and cried out in bewilderment, "Brother!" She wanted to know why he was here, and Emilian didn't understand what was going on. One way or another, our heroine soon realized that most likely this guy is the heir to the Nestro duchy. He snapped his fingers and said he had arrived much earlier than expected. Suddenly, the carriage began to shake. Magic? As it turned out, he lifted them into the air to fix the carriage. Mages are as rare as priests, and he also has outstanding abilities. Nevertheless, Lady Nestro happily ran to her brother, and our heroine decided that she could relax. By the way, the coachman and the horses were also fine. Anyway, our heroine looked at the brother and sister and thought again. It was strange that she did not understand who it was right away because they looked like their parents. However, it was unexpected. She didn't think that Leonela and her brother had such a good relationship. Soon after these thoughts, she noticed the smiles of the two and was very surprised. And again they smiled as if they were playing What Was Wrong with the Nestro Duchy. At this point, Leonela Nestro decided to ask her brother why he attacked the carriage. The guy replied that he smelled the monster, so he decided to take forced measures. Even though our heroine's clothes were stained with his blood, it was still too much. In any case, she introduced herself and said that this whole situation had ruined her mood. The guy bowed down and said his name was Veron Nestro, and he apologized for the way their first meeting had gone. Our heroine didn't understand what kind of emotional apology this was. She decided to say that the white carriages belonged to the sanctuary, so first she needed to find out everything and then act. The guy said that he understands his guilt and will take it into account. Leonela Nestro also began to apologize for her brother to Lady Emilian. Our heroine thought that although it seemed like they were getting along well, their relationship could be completely different. At that moment, Leonela Nestro hugged her brother and said that she would go with him and that she would visit the sanctuary another time. In this case, our heroine said that she understood her and wished them a good rest. After some time, Emilian herself was resting in the bathroom. The dagger the crown prince threw grazed her face and it still hurts. It's not like you want to be a saint. Although it contains a large amount of divine power, unfortunately it cannot heal itself, but its recovery speed is much faster. If death is not destined for her by fate, then she will not die because her body is divine grace. However, she wondered why she felt pain. Maybe she hadn't been blessed at all. By the way, Veron said he smelled a monster. A person without divine power, it seems, could not recognize the aura of a monster. In general, I would not like such a situation to happen again in the future. By the way, at that moment the girl remembered that the prince didn't even thank her and took her favorite shawl for himself. Well, whatever today, these hands killed a monster and saved a human life. It was dirty and creepy scary at times, but she got through it, so it's all good. As soon as our heroine finished taking a bath, she came out and noticed Lenevin, who was waiting for her. The girl remembered that she had asked him to wait here. She apologized for making him wait. One way or another, she handed over the documents and asked that they be transferred to the Imperial Palace. These are documents about the monster that injured the prince. The emperor will ask her to find out, so she prepared everything in advance. Right after that, our heroine said that that was all she wanted to say so he could go. However, Lenevin at that moment said that she had received a letter from the palace. The girl asked what it said. The guy said that instead of the cancelled banquet, they were planning to hold a celebration in her honor. Our heroine asked again. The guy said that this was the emperor's gratitude for saving the crown prince. His Highness needs peace, so he is unlikely to get it. In any case, Lenevin began to say that if she didn't want it, he would understand and pass it on. However, Emilian told him that everything was fine and then asked him to tell the emperor that she would be there. The celebration is dedicated to her, but it will be held in the palace. If Lady Nestro comes, she will drag her entire harem with her. But in any case, she decided that there was no way she could miss out on any fun that might be there. At that moment, she noticed a group of people standing outside her door, so she asked them to come in. The sanctuary's manager Lewin told Lady Emilian that it was time for her to prepare to leave. Our heroine told her that it was not time yet, because she would make it an hour before leaving. The event would take place in the evening after all. However, the girl screamed in confusion and said that she needed to wash, comb her hair, get dressed, and put on makeup. They don't have time anyway. Instantly, she picked up Lady Emilian and started to lead her into the room, saying that they needed to hurry. Our heroine sighed heavily and said that she didn't want to. However, already in the corridor, Emilian noticed how much Lewin had changed. At first, she avoided even eye contact with her, and this was already silently about starting a conversation. The girl smiled and thought, had she really become a full-fledged member of this place? The action moves to evening. Lenevin stood opposite the window and watched the sunset. At that very moment, someone called him, so the guy was a little surprised. Realizing that it was Lady Emilian's voice, he turned around and asked if she had called him. However, his face changed in surprise. In front of him stood the incredibly beautiful Emilian, telling him that he looked good today. But the guy still looked at her in bewilderment and said that she looked very good, unlike him. Emilian thanked him shyly. However, the guy bowed and said that he would accompany her today. Already walking, she said that he usually visits such places instead of her, and she is grateful to him for that. The guy said it was his duty to help her, but he asked if she was really okay. Our heroine didn't quite understand his words. Lenevin explained that he always thought that she tried to avoid such events. It seemed like something happened then that confused her, didn't it? Emilian thought about it. Lenevin had always been concerned about her behavior. She thought he only cared about Lady Nestro, although maybe he just had a kind soul. Anyway, she apologized for making him worry because everything was fine. Then he said he could only be happy. One way or another, our heroine told him not to think about her and to concentrate more on himself. It turned out that our heroine is very fickle. She couldn't stand these events before. However, today was different. At that moment, Lenevin and Emilian entered the room and were greeted, only this was done by the one who announced those who were coming. In turn, the rest of the audience did not say a word, but on the contrary, silently looked around. Emilian certainly noticed that the early buzz of conversation had changed to silence as they entered. Were they discussing sanctuary matters? After she became a saint, some of the aristocrats began to look at the shrine with hostility, but she acted fairly so that the shrine would receive a share. She increased the budget of the sanctuary, so some people thought I was stealing money that should have gone into their pockets. But still, if the sanctuary disappears, there will be very big losses. One way or another, our heroine offered Lenevin to sit down. The guy agreed. Then he said that aristocrats usually arrived slowly. According to the plan, they were supposed to be among the last to enter, but they arrived quickly. Emilian also noticed that it came out faster than last time, which means there was no need to rush Lewin. At this point, the next couple began to be announced. Lonella Nestro and her companion, Duke Enessus Kazian, arrived at the event. Everyone immediately started saying how beautiful they were. They reacted differently to Lenevin. Suddenly, a stranger approached our heroine and greeted her. The guy bowed before Emilian and told her that he was always at her disposal. What was this disdain in his greeting? Our heroine asked who it was, and Lenevin answered her that it was the second son of Count Mozio. In that case, Emilian turned to him again and said hello. The guy told her that he had participated in a hunting tournament. Didn't she recognize him? The girl smiled and told him that there was no time for dating because he himself knew what happened. The boy nodded his head and said that he had heard about how she had helped his knights as well, so he was grateful that she had bestowed her attention on his pathetic subordinates. And so this nasty, assessing look and self-confident smile has revealed itself. There are people who are trying in every way to hurt our heroine. However, at that moment the guy said that if Emilian didn't mind, they could dance, but our heroine immediately refused. She smiled, saying that she was glad to meet him, but still wished him a good time. Mozio was perplexed, and didn't even have time to say a word. But Lenevin took Emilian, and at her request, they quickly went for a walk somewhere. The guy wanted to catch up with her, but at that moment he was simply blocked by Lonella Nestro and Enessus, who noticed God's grace and greeted her. The girl said that God bless them. Soon she asked the lady if she had solved the problems with her family. The girl smiled and said that thanks to Emilian, everything was fine. However, she assumed that she was tired, then so did she manage to have a good rest. Suddenly, people began to greet the grace of God. They greeted her ladyship, asked how Lenevin was doing, and how Duke Nestro was doing. When our heroes walked together, everyone avoided looking in their direction and kept their distance. However, as soon as Lanella Nestro approached them, suddenly all the people pounced on them like bees on a hive. Enesis at this point said that due to the hustle and bustle of the hunting competition, he had not been able to express his gratitude to her. He bowed down to her and thanked her for saving Nella. Emilian told him not to do that. She knew for sure that Duke Kasian was not against the sanctuary, or he was trying to control himself in front of his beloved, but why then does this man look at her as if she is his rival? At that moment, a puzzled Lady Nestro came up and asked her friend if he was really thanking Lady Emilian. Instead of her, our heroine just decided that she had imagined it. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard. Emilian began to turn her head from side to side and tried to determine where the sound was coming from. Not understanding what was happening, our heroine felt a terrible premonition. At that moment, she raised her head and looked at the chandelier. Something was wrong with it. Perhaps now it... Literally, as our heroine thought, the chandelier chain snapped in the blink of an eye. Everyone screamed in horror, but our heroine instantly pushed Lenevin away from herself. With great difficulty, the girl dodged, but the chandelier slightly hit her. Lenevin, realizing what was happening, asked the lady in horror if she was okay. The girl turned around and said that she was almost unaffected. Then she wanted to say something to Lenevin, but suddenly she felt sick. The guy ran up to her in horror and asked again how she felt. Emilian said that everything was fine, but asked to examine the chandelier. The guy still insisted that he needed to examine her wound. The girl said that it was unnecessary, and it would be better to quickly figure out if there were any oddities. Lenevin was certainly shocked, and not a little shocked, but still said that he would be back soon. Our heroine, holding his hand, told the high priest that she had hopes for him. Meanwhile, panic began among the public. People were horrified by the sight of blood. One of the men at that moment shouted, saying that he asked to call the palace physician. Our heroine immediately assumed that the fragments had scattered everywhere. At that moment, she noticed Halo Lastuin, who was writhing in pain and confusion. Was he in pain too? She approached him and asked him to let her take a look. Halo Lastuin almost jumped in surprise. Anyway, she used her healing magic and started helping the guy. In just a moment, his hands were perfectly clean, and there were no traces of wounds. Seeing this magic, a whole crowd of people ran to Emilian and began asking her to help them. Many were injured, but fortunately nothing serious. Then she would try that. The girl asked everyone to calm down and not move. At that very moment, she began to use magic, but more substantial. Thanks to the mass spell, all the people's wounds were healed, and there was not a scratch on their bodies. In that case, she settled the matter of the first urgency. Then the girl turned to Duke Kasian and asked if he was okay. The guy nodded his head. Overall, this was not surprising, since they were at a safe distance. Finally, Lenevin came running and told the saint that there was a strange mark where the chain had broken. It looked like the chain had been cut off on purpose. He didn't find the tool, so he decided that magic was used and that the monster's poison was found on many of the crystals in the chandelier. Our heroine seemed to feel that her head was spinning. Not from pain. Ordinary poison does not affect her, but the monster's poison can. Either way, it was strange. If normal people were to suffer from the poison, their wounds wouldn't heal so quickly, and she didn't notice any signs of poisoning in anyone. The guy wanted to say that he himself didn't understand, but at that moment all the people around him began to say, in bewilderment, that they hoped that everything would be okay. Our heroine clapped her hands to get their attention and asked them to be quiet. The chandelier fell right above her head, so everyone probably knows what she's getting at. The girl screamed and asked angrily how they dared to underestimate her. Did they really despise the sanctuary that much? That is why she decided to announce in the name of Saint Emilian that from now on the sanctuary would completely suspend its monster extermination activities. People started shouting in confusion and asking what kind of nonsense this was. Should they really resist monsters only with physical force? However, at that moment, a man approached our heroine from the side and asked the saint to calm down. Turning around, the girl saw Marquis Mithra in front of her. He is the most powerful and influential person among all the aristocrats of the empire. He called for using commoners as bait. He assumed that Emilian was very scared because of the falling chandelier, so it was difficult to remain calm in such a situation, but still she should think about everything. He began to tell her about the main purpose of the sanctuary, saying that it was not a funny joke to shut down her monster-slaying activities. Emilian said that they were the ones making the joke, not her. Mithra laughed, and then asked in surprise what she meant. The girl explained that the mistress of the sanctuary is a saint, and this, as everyone knows, is she. She is the one who hears God, who brings abundance and peace to the empire. It was for their sake that she decided to suspend the activities of the sanctuary. People whispered in confusion, asking what this meant. The girl said that their treatment of the god's beloved could only anger the god himself, but she did not want the god to punish them. In that case, it was she who decided to take on their punishment. What was better, to remain without the support of the temple or to be punished by heaven? Mithra, perplexed, began to ask, what if that happened? What was the point of the shrine's existence then? Emilian reminded that it's not just about eliminating monsters, they're just taking a short break. Then she said that this would last until the criminal who attempted to kill the saint was found, so she thought everyone was in agreement. The man asked if she really wanted them to catch the attacker. What if it was just an accident? What if there is no criminal? The sanctuary will never fulfill its duties again. It's funny that there is a lot of evidence and he still stands his ground. Emilian wondered if the managers wouldn't have noticed a chandelier that was about to fall. The idea that someone did it on purpose sounds more plausible. The man wanted to say something, but he hesitated. As soon as she touched on the subject of the title's influence, he immediately fell silent. Soon, Emilian asked all people not to forget that she is the deputy of God himself, so she punishes them. All this time, there was only one guy standing on the sidelines who did not join in the discussion. This suspicious man turned out to be Lady Nestro's brother, Veron Nestro. After some time, Lewin approached Lady Emilian in bewilderment, talking about her wound. Our heroine turned around and said that it was nothing, but still asked to bring her a bandage so as not to stain everything around. Soon after, she sat on her bed, thinking about how everything was driving her crazy. Why was it so hard? If the chandelier had fallen on her, she would have been unconscious for at least a month. It is not so easy to kill a saint, but it is still possible to injure her. She is terrified by all these thoughts. Somewhere nearby, there is a person attempting to take her life. Should she go abroad? At that moment, Lenevin knocked on our heroine's door. Emilian was surprised, but asked him to come in. As soon as he came in, she asked what happened. The guy said that he brought her some bandages and he had something to tell her. He apologized if he disturbed her. Anyway, he looked at her and said that she had acted recklessly today. Our heroine asked again in surprise. The guy started shouting, saying that his main task was her safety, so he had to protect her. He confessed that it was impossible to allow her to be hurt. Even if he sacrificed his life, he promised her that she would never. Our heroine asked him not to say this and then asked if he had come here to say only this. She had suffered, so she needed peace. The guy started mumbling something, but the girl shoved a candy into his mouth and said that she wanted to hear different words from him. He certainly felt guilty for failing to do his duty, but if she left it like this, he would not be able to sleep because of his thoughts. Our heroine looked at him in surprise and asked him if he didn't like the candy. The guy, perplexed, said that he couldn't understand why she liked them. These candies were special Emilian herbal candies with a mint flavor. Because of their characteristic smell, many inhabitants of the empire did not like them. It was a pity that he didn't like the candy, but Emilian asked the high priest to sit down. Soon she asked if today's situation happened to the crown prince, what would the people's reaction be? Would she just run to him? Of course not. They are so obsessed with hierarchy. Duke Cassian was the quickest to react and shield Lady Nestro. However, she, being in the most dangerous zone, was left without attention. According to the laws, the saint is higher than the duke's daughter, but he could not determine whom to protect, and still no one reproached him. It was today that they saw how much the aristocrats underestimated the work of the sanctuary. Means that can be easily controlled, and those who come to the rescue at the first call. Lenevin asked what if in a dangerous situation no one thought of this. Emilian said she limited them to show they had the right to refuse Lenevin, however asked what if a higher-level monster appeared. Our heroine replied that such monsters are encountered once in 100 years. Now there will be only low-level monsters, and even ordinary knights will be able to cope with them. Lenevin sighed and said she was right. Emilian assured him anyway that she would make an exception if one came along since she wasn't that strict. There is no law preventing her from doing this. She asked Lenevin if it was true. The guy said, as if in some kind of despair that it was true, what happened to him. The action, meanwhile, takes us to Marquis Mithra, who was thinking that he had not been so furious for a long time. This devil Emilian appeared out of nowhere and became a saint and started setting conditions. However, she is just a little thing who came here only a year ago. What can she do on her own? The aristocrats keep submitting requests to exterminate monsters. How dare she look down on their society? It would be better to keep a low profile and keep busy. Deciding that if she dared to turn her nose up at him, he would make her regret it several times over. Meanwhile, our heroine poured out a whole bunch of letters that were already getting on her nerves. She had no doubt that people would continue to send her requests implying that they didn't value her. One way or another, she wondered what the criminal who dropped the chandelier on her was doing. The imperial family had said they would look into the matter. At that moment, Lenevin knocked on her room door and said he was coming in. As soon as the guy entered the room, our heroine asked in bewilderment if he hadn't slept. Lenevin said in a long voice that everything was fine. He told her that she should worry about herself first. Emilian in turn said how much aristocrats annoy her. They just don't want to end up in the red. Lenevin also looked at the fire and asked if she thought the sanctuary should help those who needed help. The girl looked at him thoughtfully, and the guy immediately screamed and told her that he in no way wanted to dispute her order. Now he just couldn't accept this fact yet. Nothing less could be expected from a man with innate divine powers. However, Emilian stood her ground, saying that one must always think about one's actions. However, apparently she didn't explain it clearly, so she asked to give her a little time, and she would try to put everything in its place. After stopping the extermination of monsters after the chandelier incident, she gave many priests a vacation. They worked without rest, so they deserved it. Lenevin then asked for the others. The rest she sent to the slums to deliver food and bring the sick and orphans here. The guy was surprised. Our heroine told him that he was the high priest, so she asked him to think about what would happen next. He shouldn't feel guilty about the aristocrats. He shouldn't forget about the common people, about the people who are often hurt. Lowering his head, the boy said guiltily that he remembered all the commoners. In that case, our heroine said that she was wrong because he did not forget but ignored them. She knew well how things were going in the sanctuary. It was the aristocrats who came with demands, not the common people who were putting pressure on him. Even though Emilian was injured, she still didn't want it to leave a bad mark. The sick and orphans from the slums will come to them. The sick will be here for treatment, and the orphans. Why does she want to bring them? The guy asked in bewilderment if she really wanted to improve the protective structure. Our heroine smiled and nodded. In memory of those who sacrificed their lives, she decided to equip a small room in the sanctuary. It doesn't have an official name yet, but its purpose is to care for orphans. She protected all those who lost their relatives in the slums. The girl said she wanted to consider a place outside the sanctuary, maybe even build a real shelter. This shelter will house orphans until they reach adulthood. The guy asked if she meant how things are now. The girl said that everything is correct. They will just legalize everything. This is directly related to taxes and other expenses. She suddenly remembered taxes. She planned to use the opportunity to completely revise the tax rates throughout the empire. The guy said that His Majesty would not allow her, and the girl herself understood this perfectly well. The previous saints could not do anything, so she wanted to try. Looking at him, she said that this was perhaps the main purpose of the god who sent her here. The guy immediately screamed and said that he would try even harder and give it his all. Our heroine smiled and said that even his words would be enough for her. Soon, the action takes us to the evening. Our heroine was sitting in the library and reading a book. However, looking out the window, she noticed that night had come, so it was time to rest. Of all the places she had been, she liked the sanctuary library the most. There was a reason for this, of course, but at that moment, our heroine found what she was looking for. There are a lot of romance books in the shrine library. The one she got was one of them. This place was occupied by all the saints. Apparently among them were those whose taste was similar to hers. Perhaps they would even become good friends. By the way, it was impossible not to notice the impressive title of the book, Love of a Monster. It is strange that with such a title it ended up in the sanctuary at all. In any case, having decided that it was fiction, she nevertheless began to read it. The story begins in a primitive way. A long time ago, a monster was born in a forest. He observed people and could even think. He listened to voices, studied paintings, writing food, and even people's clothes. One of those days, a monster entered the body of a beautiful girl and came to the village, but it was hard to get used to the human body. She fell tripping, but then a man suddenly appeared and helped the beauty get up. Of course, they fell in love with each other at first sight, but fate decided to play a cruel joke on them. The man turned out to be a priest. If he finds out who the beautiful girl really is, she will lose her life. The monster girl still decided to give in to her love, but lost in her dreams, she made a mistake. The sanctuary learned of the true nature of the priest's beloved. Then they told the man about her and ordered him to kill her. Because of his love, he could not watch his beloved die, and in the end he decided to run away with her. However, they failed to deceive the sanctuary. The exiled priest died saving the monster's girl. The man she loved was dying in the arms of a crying girl, and then she said, "Why am I a monster? Why am I not a person like you?" Quite unusual. A monster that thinks like a human and expresses feelings of love. Even if such a thing exists, it is unknown when it will turn to humans. However, it is right that the sanctuary judges such people, but the story is very tragic. After some time, the girl came to her office but noticed Lenevin still sitting at the table. She put her hand on his shoulder and said that she asked him not to overdo it at night. The guy was very scared. Nevertheless, taking the piece of paper in her hand, she asked if he had any more business. She suddenly began to read, "Count Guasen is guilty of kidnapping 21 girls. He is also accused of attacking them. Given that Count Guasen holds a special position, he is exempted from punishment." It's funny she only read one document. She looked at Lenevin and told him he was doing well. The guide told her that she had entrusted him with this matter. She said that the rotten aristocrats needed to be overthrown, and that would lower taxes. Our heroine said that everything was correct. If they work out the plan, then His Majesty will not be against it. Their opponents will only be aristocrats. Looking at Lenevin, she asked, what was wrong? The guy said there were some aristocrats here that he got along well with, and he couldn't believe they had committed multiple crimes. It's hard to do that. Emilian put the document on the table and asked if he was scared. Lenevin said he was. This time the punishment would be much more terrible. Our heroine told him that she knew this well, but if he was afraid to punish sinners, was he a servant of God? He needs to think about the people who became victims because of criminals. If it is for the good of those who suffered, then he should not feel guilty for sending freaks to the very heart of hell. She asked him to think carefully and sort out his thoughts. Would it be wise to continue to turn a blind eye to everything as before? Looking at his gaze, she decided that she had probably worried for nothing. Either way, she was glad that they understood each other. Stroking his head, Emilian said that it was hard to understand if there was no one nearby who helped him get on the right path. She again asked him not to blame himself because he was a great guy, and she would take all these documents to the emperor herself. The next day she announced the punishment of sinful aristocrats and the reduction of taxes. All the aristocrats led by Duke Nestro supported this idea. The emperor also agreed to approve the punishment only after the truth of the crime was confirmed. The actions are postponed for 2 days. Waking up, Emilian thought that they had successfully overcome the first critical moment. Why was it so noisy outside? She decided to go out and check. But when she saw herself in the mirror, she decided that it was not worth doing it looking like that. The girl began to tidy herself up, and at that very moment someone entered her room. It was Lewin, who was surprised that Lady Emilian was already awake. Emilian asked why it was so noisy so early in the morning. The woman said that the criminal who attempted to take her life had been caught. Our heroine was very happy to hear this. Nevertheless, Lewin, perplexed, began to ask why she had to be so stupid. At first glance, she was an ordinary lady, but she turned out to be a stupid child. Our heroine asked again, and Lewin decided that she needed to take a look. She would help her get dressed. After some time, she descended, and the priests greeted God's grace. The girl said that the blessing of the Lord would touch them, and soon after that, she said that they could stand up. Soon the sinner, Jessie Fotra, was shown. She was caught last night for the attempted murder of a saint. Is this a criminal? Anyway, Emilian said they did a great job, but why is she like that? The guy said she was resisting. I see His Majesty thought she wanted such an investigation. The proposed punishment was confiscation of property and title of nobility. In any case, our heroine approached her and asked her to stand peacefully and she would heal her. The saint didn't even have time to touch her, but at that moment she already began to scream incredibly loudly. Emilian understood that the girl was in a panic, so she should hurry. She immediately began to use her magic. After some time, the girl's screams stopped and her tears stopped flowing. She fell to the ground and our heroine looked at her and asked if she was okay. The girl began to cry again, asking the saint for help because her parents. Turning around, our heroine asked Lenevin to take the sinner inside and she would personally interrogate her. The girl told everyone that she would go on her own so the knights could go. Unexpectedly soon, a guy approached our heroine and greeted God's grace. Turning around, she saw Enesis, who was addressing her and asking her to give him some of her time. The girl looked at him in surprise and asked what happened to his clothes. The guy replied that he had fought a monster a few days ago. The girl asked why his subordinates weren't monitoring this. The guy replied that the situation had gotten worse recently, so it wasn't the time to think about such trifles. Our heroine was surprised that something had happened in the Cajun duchy. At that moment, the guy said that this was not the reason for his visit. To make them pay for the sins that the aristocrats committed, this is what Emilian asked His Majesty about. Our heroine was surprised that he came because of this, but said that he was well informed. Enesis suddenly said that until now he had not known about his father's sins. He was very ashamed that even after receiving the title, he had not guessed about it. The previous duke was an arrogant aristocrat like the rest. He abused his powers, so it's no wonder his son didn't know about it. However, this crime is nothing compared to other aristocrats. She is even surprised that the duke considered abuse of power a sin. Anyway, the guy said that he came to express his gratitude for her revealing the crimes of the previous duke and assigning punishments. Our heroine asked in surprise if she was an enemy since she had caught his father in a crime. The guy said that although he was a good person for him, all sins were punished. Emilian thought so about him. Enesis is not a bad person at all, and the duchy began to flourish after he came to power. However, the guy said that he wanted to apologize to Lady Emilian for his father. Our heroine said that he shouldn't do it because there was no point in it. Enesis still stood his ground, saying that he had to do it. He dropped to one knee and asked Lady Emilian for forgiveness for allowing her to get hurt that day. He, as a knight who failed to protect her, must suffer the same punishment, so he is ready to do whatever she says. According to the laws of the empire, he was guilty. She, of course, does not like that. No one perceives the sanctuary, but she did not plan all this to punish Duke Casian. Besides, despite his title, he sincerely apologizes, so she decided to do it differently. She asked if this situation happened again, would he save her? However, the guy suddenly fell silent. Our heroine asked why he wasn't answering, or was he not sincere when he apologized? Enesis replied that he did indeed feel guilty towards her, so he swears on the honor of his family. He apologized for not being able to say with certainty that his choices in the future would be the same as they are now. Emilian suddenly laughed and said that she wanted to joke a little. She did not intend to punish him. Even though his actions would be considered wrong by the laws of this country, she fully understands his intentions to protect someone dear to him. Even though she was in the middle of danger, her rescue was reasonable, but if she continued to talk about it, she would seem grumpy. That's why she decided to sum it up. Feelings can't always lead you down a rational path. But turning a blind eye to this, she said that considering that he came to her to apologize, she would turn a blind eye to everything. However, she asked him to stand up and also ask him a question. The guy said that she could do it. Our heroine asked him what he liked about Lady Lanella. This is a great chance to hear the reason why he loved her. Even in novels, she loved the moments when a man talks about his feelings. However, the guy stood rooted to the spot. He asked himself in horror what it was about Lady Lanella that he liked. Our heroine almost thought that he wanted to ask if love needed a reason. Anyway, judging by the reaction, he really didn't know the reason. Well, that was quite an unexpected reaction. Enesis then said that he couldn't answer that question. After some time, our heroine finished washing herself. She was worried about the state of Duke Caitian because he hesitated and left in a hurry. At that moment, a guy came up to our heroine and said that he would take the used towel. Emilian was grateful for that. The guy smiled sheepishly and said that he should thank her. Then she asked if he knew where Lenevin was. The boy said he saw the high priest heading to the guest room at the end of the hall. Immediately she turned around and told him he could go. Already standing in front of the door, she was thinking about sorting this matter out. Suddenly, she heard noise inside the room. Opening the door, she noticed the high priest trying to calm Jessifatra down. The girl screamed in horror and told them all to get away from her, otherwise she would lose control of herself. However, the guy finally noticed our heroine and was happy about it. Emilian asked what was going on. The guy said that he brought the girl tea, and she suddenly took out a knife hidden in her leg. Looking at the bottle in her hand, our heroine realized that it was a sleeping pill with a smell. Did she really want to escape from here with its help? Our heroine decided that no one had examined her for such items, they just wanted to beat up a person instead of doing their job. Lenevin confirmed her words, saying that she was brought here immediately. Emilian realized that she had not contacted anyone except the knights. Looking at Jessie Fautra threatening her, our heroine decided that this could even be to their advantage. One way or another, she asked her to calm down because if she was going to do something to her, she would not have sent her to this room. However, she disobeyed this request and decided that she was a commando, so she started waving the knife. But suddenly her dagger fell out of her hand and flew towards our heroine. Soon, Emilian crouched down and picked up the blade, taking it in her hands. Jessie Fautra was incredibly scared. Looking at the evil Emilian, the girl asked in horror to save her. She promised not to do it again. Holding the knife in her hand, our heroine thought, what should she do in this situation? Emilian began to swing the blade demonstratively. Jessie Fautra began to scream in horror, but our heroine suddenly turned to her and asked her to calm down. She was not going to stab her under any circumstances. Leaning towards her, she simply asked why she was acting like this. She hadn't done it, so why had she come to the sanctuary then? The girl, perplexed, said that it was her. Our heroine said that it was funny because the person who took it with him was telling her this. It would be fine if she admitted her guilt and sat quietly, but only someone who is not guilty can act up like that, so it's unconvincing. Our heroine asked her why she was a criminal, and so the answer followed. Emilian asked how she did it all. Looking at her, she asked her to tell what tools she used, and if she used magic, she told her to show it here and now. It is so strange that a criminal who admits her sin cannot explain how she committed it. The answer is obvious. It's all because she is not the person she is looking for. Apparently, the Imperial Guard's investigation had yielded no results, and as soon as a man appeared red-handed, they decided to seize the opportunity. Although it was terrible that she was even beaten on top of all this, our heroine wanted to understand who wanted to pin the blame on her. Jessie Fautra suddenly felt a thought. She should say that she did it, but if they found out it was a lie, attention would turn to him. Realizing what a nightmare awaited her, the girl screamed again and said that it was her. She had to hide it by any means necessary. She said she had forgotten about that day, but she really did it. She had to convince the saint, otherwise her parents were in danger. Emilian walked up to Jessie Fautra and told her to listen to what she was about to say. She can't fool her with such terrible acting. She's pretty sure it wasn't her doing it. Our heroine dared to suggest that she was only worried about her family. Seeing no reaction, Emilian turned to Lenevin and asked him to send a man to the lands of Baron Fautra immediately. She told them to bring her parents to the sanctuary and they would protect them, and she also told them that all this was for the sake of their daughter. Jessie Fautra asked in confusion what she was doing, and our heroine calmly answered that she would help her get out of this situation. She would help, right? The girl began to cry and ask the saint if she could really save her family. Our heroine took her hand and said that she would do everything in her power. Soon after, the girl started crying even more, so Emilian hugged her and started to calm her down. After some time, Lenevin came to our heroine again, knocking on her door. The girl asked to come in. The guy apologized, saying that he heard that Lady Jessie Fautra was with her now. Our heroine pointed at the girl and said that she was here, but she was not a criminal but her guest. She could not leave her in dirty clothes. The guy was of course surprised. However, he immediately said that he had sent priests and a carriage to the lands of Baron Fautra. Emilian said that was good, and then added that they were just about to talk, so she invited him to sit down. Our heroine soon took out a jar of her candies and suggested taking one Jessie Fautra. The girl happily took one candy into her mouth, just like Mrs. Emilian. However, soon our heroine's face showed delight, but Jessie's face resembled that she was in incredible horror. Soon she even grimaced, not understanding what kind of delicious thing it was. Was it really edible? Noticing that the girl had swallowed the candy whole, our heroine said in bewilderment that this was not allowed. Jessie Fautra apologized, saying that she had a very strong taste. Emilian sighed and said that there was no one who would appreciate these candies yet. Anyway, she said that it was not the most important thing now. Looking at the girl, she asked her to tell everything in order, but lying was forbidden. Jessie Fotra hung her head down and said she understood. She immediately began to say that her family had been on the verge of collapse lately. Her uncle, the Marquis of Sarone, took away from them the mine which was their only source of income and attributed his debts to them. However, a week before the banquet, a man came to her and offered her a large sum of money, telling her to do as she was told. A chandelier will fall on the saint's head. After a few days of investigation, she will have to convince everyone that she did it. In that case, the money will be hers. But if something went wrong and she jeopardized his position, then her family would be in danger. Emilian assumed that she knew nothing about the criminal. The girl sighed and said that was true. Lenevin asked if she remembered any signs. The girl said that when he pulled out the bag, she noticed a black mark on the inside of his wrist, 2 snakes that bit the eagle's wings. Our heroine instantly turned to Lenevin in horror, and the guy told her that she was right. It was an anti-divine sect. The anti-God sect is a community of dark magicians who commit evil deeds in secret and do not recognize the sanctuary. They always act secretly, so almost nothing is known about them. Emilian could not even imagine that they were involved in this. The girl told Jessie that she would live with her family in the sanctuary for now because if there were cultists involved, it would be better to stay here. The girl agreed. Either way, Emilian was not guaranteed a comfortable stay. Since she arrived here as a criminal, she would be the target of displeased glances. Jessie Fotra replied that compared to what she had been through, the terrible thoughts that had consumed her, it meant nothing. In any case, she bowed and thanked him for giving her a chance. No matter what happened, she would be on Emilian's side. Our heroine said that if she follows the good path, then soon others will also open up to her. However, Jessie Fotra said that as long as she is here, she will try to help. Emilian said that she can count on her. At this moment, our heroine was called to him by Lenevin, who was sitting next to her and wanted to say something. The guy said that she could also address him freely and informally, and what's more, he wanted her to do so. Emilian asked if he meant to switch to informal form of address. The guy said that he would feel more comfortable that way. Our heroine smiled and told Lenevin that she understood him and would address him informally. Our heroine hoped that the rest of the night would pass peacefully, but looking at Mr. Nestro, who came to her in the middle of the night, she asked what he wanted. Emilian laughed and said that Lady Nestro does that too, so maybe it runs in the family, showing up unannounced. The guy in turn told her that he wasn't going to run into her. Our heroine didn't quite understand these words. He soon said that he used invisibility magic, but she still saw him. Emilian looked at him suspiciously and said that it was true she could see him perfectly well. However, the guy asked not to misunderstand him. He did not come here with bad intentions. Emilian said she didn't know why he was there, but that didn't change the fact that he had entered her office without permission. Anyway, she asked him what he wanted to say, and the guy turned around and said that it was getting stronger. It was about the smell. Soon he approached the saint, and taking her by the neck said that the reason for this was in her. The girl pulled his hand away, wondering how he dared touch her. She had lifted the ban on killing monsters. Veron asked again, surprised, and then said that he remembered, could it be that he had not meant this? In any case, he turned again to the saint. Looking at Emilian, the guy asked if she wanted to make a deal with him. Our heroine, perplexed, asked what kind of deal they were talking about, to which Veron replied that he didn't want her to get close to his sister. Quite a strange condition, Emilian told him that it was quite problematic, because she was even responsible for her security. She was worried about her. The guy replied that he would deal with it himself, so she didn't need to bother herself with the problems of the Nestro family. Looking at Emilian, he said that he, the heir of the Nestro family, had returned. Our heroine decided that he was serious. In any case, she asked what the terms of the deal were. Soon after, our heroine took his hand and kissed it. Veron certainly did not expect this. Then Emilian looked up and asked, what if she accepted his terms? How would he repay her for it? The boy brought his kissed hand to the saint's lips and said that he would protect her. If she was in danger, she could count on him, an experienced mage who possessed high-level techniques. Our heroine was sure that situations like the one with the chandelier would happen again in the future, so keeping her distance from Lady Nestro and getting her brother's protection was a good deal. That's why Emilian said she agreed. Soon the guy approached her and told her about her sister. Our heroine asked what she should do, to which he replied that she should not touch her, but they could see each other. Before leaving, he told her that if she suddenly needed him, she could call him. Moreover, he was already waiting for the moment when she would need him. The action moves to the next day. The maid Jessie Fotra and Lenevin came to Lady Emilian and began to tell her that it was time to wake up. With great difficulty, our heroine raised her head and said that she heard them. However, due to the situation at night, she did not have time to sleep at all. In any case, even in this state, she needed to get up. Finally getting out of bed, she began to reach for a glass of water. As she started drinking the water, she thought that today was a very important day. Suddenly, her brain froze. The water was iced. Lenevin put a scarf on Emilian, and she was surprised by the scent coming from him. The guy said that he sprayed him with the smell of Tito's, which she likes. Our heroine smiled and said that it was true she liked him. It was nice that he remembered such a small thing. To ensure that no one could harm such kind people, she had to win. After some time, the action takes us to the hall where the meeting was to take place. Soon, Mithra noticed Saint Emilian. It was enough for him that she had threatened them at the last banquet. However, she also stripped many aristocrats of their titles, which means he underestimated her. Even today, this scoundrel decided to play a game with them. The Marquise's face was stained. At that moment, our heroine was sitting on a chair and people were greeting God's grace. Just looking at Emilian, the man began to get angry at the arrogance of this girl. Getting up from his chair, he decided he needed to calm down. This was the last day she would be stuck up like that. However, at this moment, our heroine thanked people for taking the time to come today. Mithra looked at her thinking that she was a threat to the peace within the empire, so he had to get rid of her. He had just received the right thing for this. There was a strong poison on his hands that would affect even a saint, a wonderful find for such a vile man. He already felt how the temple would lose God's favorite without even understanding how it happened, and he would no longer lose precious savings. As soon as Lenevin brought the holy tea, the man inside himself rejoiced and shouted for her to drink it quickly. "Come on, Emilian, drink it." Suddenly, our heroine wiped the glass in bewilderment and asked what the poison was doing here. People began to scream in horror and ask if the high priest really wanted to poison the saint. The guy immediately started shouting back, telling Lady Emilian that it wasn't him because he wouldn't do anything. Our heroine asked him to calm down and told him that she knew it wasn't his doing. She turned her gaze to the hall and assumed that among them there were those who had not come to their senses and still longed for her death. At this point, Mithra turned to Lady Emilian in surprise, asking if she really suspected her own guests. He pointed out to her that they were in a sanctuary, and the tea was brewed by her people, and only priests could have conceived such a thing. People immediately decided that he was right. The priest wanted to kill the saint. Of course, that made sense. This tea is made from the leaves of a plant that grows in their garden. Most likely I got caught while preparing or serving the tea. Of course, the temple officials would never do that. Could it be that there is someone here who bribed a man in the same way that Jessie was bribed? However, at this point, Halo Lastuin asked everyone to calm down. He decided that the first thing to do was to make sure that Lady Emilian was okay. Our heroine smiled and said that she was fine. Fortunately, she was recovering quickly. Halo Lastuin said that this was good news, in which case he suggested continuing their meeting. He also added that the meeting needed to be held as quickly as possible so that they had time to find the criminal hiding among these people. Our heroine did not understand where so much enthusiasm was coming from, and Mithra at that moment asked the thinker in surprise what he was talking about. Was there really a criminal among them? The boy said it was obvious. However, the man said no one had approached the saint, so how could he be so sure of that? He explained that he had never heard of people from the sanctuary complaining about the saint. In any case, this was just his assumption. Mithra snorted at the same moment and said that there was no evidence. This was definitely the work of someone from the sanctuary. However, Halo Lastuin added that if someone mixed the poison without going near the tea, they all become suspects. Mithra immediately tensed up. People asked the guy what kind of jokes he was making because now was not the right time. Halo Lastuin laughed and said that he was not joking. In any case, the final decision would be up to Lady Emilian, so he apologized and asked to continue. Emilian noticed that Marquis Mithra had a strange expression on his face, and Halo seemed to know something. Either way, the girl decided to get down to business. She has decided to finish the work she started. As was said at the previous imperial meeting, she does not intend to change her position. She ordered that taxes be reduced to the amount she specified, and that shelters would appear in every territory in the near future. Emilian said that if anyone was against it, then they should speak up now. Of course, the first one who wasn't against it was Mithra, who, perplexed, asked to wait. Suddenly, the whole hall started shaking. All the people screamed in confusion. What was going on? Our heroine couldn't understand if it was an earthquake. At that moment, Lenevin told her to look out the window. The girl ran to the window, and to her horror, she discovered a monster outside the window. The people began to shout in confusion and ask how the monster could have ended up in the sanctuary. The girl told everyone to calm down. Our heroine looked at Lenevin and asked how many there were. The guy replied that there were about 10. In this case, the girl ordered to go with other priests outside the sanctuary and help the residents evacuate as quickly as possible. The guy said that he would stay here, but Emilian assured him that if the monsters escaped, there would be even more problems, so it was necessary to evacuate the common people. Although Lenevin was not particularly happy about this, he still turned around and ran to carry out the order. At that moment, Marquis Mithra slammed the table and asked in bewilderment, was she really not going to catch these monsters? Why was she standing there? Our heroine asked in surprise if he really wanted her to help. The man told her not to do him a favor because destroying monsters was her duty. All the people took up the Marquise's words and began to ask her to quickly destroy the monsters. If not her, then who will do it? After a while, our heroine asked Jessie if she remembered the personal information of all the guests. She wanted to know the names of the magicians and knights. Soon she asked for attention, and then she asked those whose names would be called to come forward. People asked what all this was for, and the girl said that they didn't have the people to deal with all the monsters. Many priests were away. That is why she asked for help from those who can use force and go out with her to destroy the monsters. A whole bunch of people started saying that it was dangerous, so they couldn't do it. Our heroine said that everything is so the monsters are so huge that they can swallow a person alive. To avoid being eaten, they must manage to kill them. Everyone is scared. She understands this perfectly well. Even she would like to hide from all this. However, she once again reminded that she, the saint of all living beings, therefore orders everyone to unite. At that moment, Enesis came out and said that these monsters were not low level, so all they could do was distract them and deal a few blows. Our heroine said that this would be enough for her. She would personally take care of their extermination. Enesis agreed, and so he soon turned to the knights asking why the hell they were standing there. He shouted and ordered him to go forward, knights of the Vesaloyal Empire and mages. For the sake of peace in their empire, they must obey the command of the saint. The boys, although they were seriously scared, still shouted proudly and said that they understood. Our heroine thanked Anesis, saying that thanks to him they were able to be restrained. The guy apologized for interfering without permission. Either way, he wasn't sure they could help her with so many people. However, the girl asked him not to worry because she would protect everyone and send them home. The guy looked at the saint and thought that if she was nearby, then he might not worry too much. But for some reason he felt uneasy. After some time, all the mages were ordered to attack using their skills. The knights who were supposed to go forward under the leadership of Anesis were not left without tasks either. The guy shouted for people to attack the monster and then retreated shortly after the attack. Once everything was done according to plan, Enesis turned around and told the saint that it was time to act. At that very moment, an explosion occurred and immediately splashes of the monster's blood flew in different directions. As our heroine headed towards the next monster, she suddenly wondered, had the news reached the palace? She only hoped that they would have time to send help. As soon as reinforcements arrived, they had to evacuate everyone. While killing another monster, the girl said that together they would defeat all these creatures faster. At that moment, she heard strange screams from people behind her, saying that this huge freak was quite strange. Shortly after these words, there was a huge splash. The monster flew in all directions. As a result, most of the buildings came under attack from the giant, and after some time, a whole bunch of buildings were covered with unknown clots. Soon people noticed that because of these monsters, the walls outside began to collapse. After some time, the giants reached the civilian population and began to frighten them. The magicians and priests who were in the city asked all people to calm down. Our heroine was not happy about the change in their plans. She had to deal with the monster that had just gotten out. At that moment, Emilian noticed a child in front of her running and crying, saying something about his mother. Soon after, the boy tripped and fell to the ground with a thud. Emilian ran towards him, thinking that he needed to be taken to a safe place as soon as possible. Soon after, she noticed the Marquis running away from the monster. The guy screamed and told the monster to get away from him. He didn't want to die so stupidly. However, at that moment, he discovered his so-called salvation in the form of a little boy. The man ran up to the boy, then grabbed him and threw him towards the monster. Our heroine couldn't allow this to happen, so she immediately made a dash and fortunately managed to save the child. However, the trajectory of movement did not change, and she still ran into the monster. Almost immediately, Duke Anesis came running to her aid, killing the monster with a swing of his blade. Once the monster was dealt with, the guy asked Lady Emilian if she was okay. However, our heroine sat and simply remained silent, showing no signs of involvement in the conversation. Hugging the child, the girl wondered in horror, how could this freak throw a small child at a monster? He advocated using commoners as bait and always tried to survive alone. She couldn't even believe how much shamelessness there was in him, and it drove her crazy. At that very moment, there was a huge explosion as Emilian began to lose control. Halo Lastuan looked at what was happening in horror and said that this was a force that only the first saint managed to awaken. This power was God's punishment. Seeing this, Lenevin was perplexed. All the monsters around disappeared in the blink of an eye as if they had never been there. Our heroine looked at the girl in bewilderment and asked if she was okay. With tears in his eyes, the child said that everything was fine, and at that moment, Anesis started running towards Emilian. The guy asked her in surprise how she was feeling. The girl said that everything was fine, but asked to take care of this girl. She also asked to be taken to... At that moment, our heroine was unable to finish speaking. Her head began to spin and her balance began to be lost. Soon she fell unconscious to the ground. Our heroine assumed that she had lost too much blood. Already at night, the action takes us to Emilian's room. The girl finally woke up thinking that she had barely come to her senses. Was it really night already? Then, looking at her hands, she guessed that people from the sanctuary were tending to her. Everything hurt, but apparently it was because her hand was bandaged. However, at that moment, she felt someone's strange presence. Who was standing outside her door right now? Starting to get out of bed, our heroine asked in surprise if it was really Mr. Nestro. The guy was surprised that he was recognized right away, but he still went inside asking Emilian how she was feeling. Our heroine in turn said that she was surprised that he was thinking about such a thing. The guy replied that he came here as soon as he received the news. If she had called him, as they had agreed, he would have appeared much earlier. Emilian that he said that he would protect her and also remembered that he said about the smell which was greatly intensifying. Did he really know about the appearance of monsters? Or what if this guy is the culprit of everything that happened during the day? However, she decided that such a person would not rush to help Emilian, said that they had sorted it out so she would take the chance another time. Veron nodded his head, but then said that he restored everything that was destroyed with the help of magic. The priests checked everything. There were no traces of monsters. He also said that he heard that Emilian used God's punishment. The guy said that because of this, not even the bodies of the monsters remained because everything was burned to the ground. Our heroine didn't understand what was going on. Had her sudden all-consuming anger burst forth in the form of holy power? In any case, Emilian thanked Veron for helping. She will find out more details from the high priest. At this point, Veron Nestro said that his sister had come here. Lady Emilian asked again. The boy explained that the high priest had sent her back and said that she needed rest. Emilian was surprised that he did this because he was crazy about her. The girl smiled and asked how Lady Nestro could come here in such a situation. Although she is against her, she still held back from repaying her for her help. I wonder, though, what goals does she pursue? At this moment, Lady Nestro's brother looked at Lady Emilian and asked if she liked Lonella. Our heroine smiled sweetly at him and asked who could possibly dislike her. The guy sighed heavily and then said that Lonella was a very sweet and kind person, and it couldn't be otherwise. Our heroine said that if it weren't for her, then who else in the Empire could we talk about? However, Veron at this point said that he would go. After all, his parents were already worried. Our heroine was surprised, the Duke and Duchess. Was he really returning to the estate at such a time? The boy bowed down and said that it was so because he did not want to worry his parents. It was quite unexpected. However, it means that he apparently has a very caring attitude towards his parents. Unlike his sister, this man is even more mysterious. In any case, the commotion is finally over. The action takes place the next day. Our heroine said that everyone tried their best, but she did not expect this. She asked if everyone had agreed with her opinion so easily. The boys said that it was so even the Marquis who had openly shown his displeasure. Lenevin explained that everyone was enchanted. Halo Lestuen never imagined that he would live at the same time as a saint who could use God's punishment. Emilian asked if God's punishment could kill the target quickly. Halo Lestuen told her that the records said so. In any case, he didn't know the details, but still only the first saint could use this power. Our heroine knew she'd have to practice to use it again. In any case, she understood why everyone was hiding their tails. However, after this, the girl looked at Halo Lestuen and asked if he wanted to tell her something. The guy said that in truth, he was also involved in the incident with the chandelier falling. As the high priest said, traces of poison were found on the fragments. Halo Lestuen said that to prevent the victims from developing severe symptoms of poisoning, he first found out what kind of poison it was, but it turned out that this poison was very unusual. Our heroine asked in surprise what it meant. The guy said that this poison is capable of attracting nearby divine power. Our heroine was in incredible shock. Could this really be poison that reacts to divine power? Halo Lestuen continued speaking. Magic was used in the manufacturing process, so the state of the substance does not affect anything. In other words, under the right conditions, the poison can spread, even when in a liquid state. As soon as a person with divine power enters the danger zone, he is immediately exposed to the poison. Lenevin suddenly turned to the thinker and said that he had no symptoms of poisoning, and his body was not recovering so quickly. Halo Lestuen didn't know how to say it more gently, but he decided to say that it was all because Lady Emilian's power was much greater than his. Our heroine asked if that was really why the poison had affected her more. The guy replied that, judging by his data, it was. The girl immediately said that it was very interesting, and if he personally decided to tell about it, then he also believed that the same poison was used at the meeting yesterday. The guy nodded his head. Our heroine assumed that there was no need to even add poison to her cup. All that was needed was to time the moment when she would start drinking tea and soon say that poison had been added. Halo Lestuen said that everything is correct and that she is absolutely right. We need to find the bottle to have proof. Lenevin told our heroine that they had failed to search anyone. Yesterday, Emilian replied that if the criminal had taken her and thrown her away, there was nothing to be done. The guy nevertheless assumed that if he got rid of the evidence when everyone was busy exterminating monsters, then he would try to search the surrounding area. At that moment, Lenevin's words were interrupted as a joyful, previously rescued girl ran into the room. Our heroine immediately recognized her, and the girl in turn happily spoke about how she had met a real saint. Jessie Fautre picked her up and said it was rude and then apologized. She was being naughty, that's why she brought her. As this girl said she wanted to hand something over to our heroine, Emilian asked in surprise if it was really for her. The girl screamed and said that she found it yesterday and it seemed like something very expensive. Holding out a bottle that looked too much like a container for poison, the girl said that she was giving it to Emilian. Eventually, thanks to this, the Marquis of Mithra was sentenced to death after a trial conducted by the Emperor himself. It was revealed that the poison belonged to the Marquis. The Emperor found the Marquis guilty of attempting to assassinate the saint, and the incident with the chandelier was also attributed to him. Of course, he desperately denied all these words. He said that he swears that he is not guilty of what happened, but the Emperor did not even listen to him because he wanted to end it sooner. The miserable Marquis certainly got what he deserved because he chose an unfortunate time. At this point, the Emperor asked the saint if she was happy. In any case, if this continues, chaos will begin in the Empire. This was a real threat, so our heroine would do well to be careful. She hoped that there would be no incidents in the near future because she needed to train her body. At the moment, she has divine power, physical abilities, and divine punishment. It turns out that with divine power, a lot of physical power is spent. That time, our heroine fell not because of blood loss, but because she had used up all of her body's resources using divine punishment. If she sharpens her combat skills and sword art, it will be easier to resist the anti-divine sect. She was taught by a sword art teacher. The guy told her that she had excellent basic skills. All she had to do was breathe correctly. Anyway, that was all for today. Taking his sword, he said that she had done a great job. At that moment, the girl our heroine saved was sitting on the ground and laughing next to the dog. Our heroine called out to Chen in surprise. Chung-ena is the girl who brought the bottle of poison. They haven't found her family, so for now, she lives in the sanctuary. Finding herself in an unfamiliar place would be scary even for an adult, but Chung quickly adapted to life in the sanctuary. Emilian could even say that it was too fast, so she had already managed to create a lot of trouble. The girl asked where the dog came from. The girl said that the dog was standing at the entrance to the sanctuary, however she asked to look at his beautiful fur. Our heroine assumed that he had a Master Chung, in turn said that she thought he was all alone like her. Shouldn't he be here? Emilian stroked the girl's head and said that she was not angry with her. By the way, she could not understand why the girl was speaking so sadly. And then she asked if he had ever bitten. Chung-ena happily said that he was very kind and they had played with him. At that moment, the girl called the swordsmanship teacher and asked him to call Jessie because the girl needed to change her clothes. Our heroine also thought about it. She asked the girl if Jessie or someone else was with her. The girl said that they went to decorate the garden and some were seeing off the priests. In that case, our heroine decided that everyone was busy preparing for the goddess festival. Then she asked where Chung's friends were. Did she want to play with them? As soon as the girl heard this question, she lowered her head in embarrassment and thought for a long time. Our heroine was very surprised. Why didn't she answer? Was she really being bullied? At that moment, the dog was standing nearby and barking happily. Soon the dog began to circle around the girls and bark even louder. Emilian assumed that he wanted to play with them. Sitting down next to him, our heroine stroked him, saying that he was a very friendly and good boy. The dog was only happy about this affection, so he lay down on his belly and asked to be stroked. Chung-ena did just that with joy, as she couldn't pass by such a cutie. Then the girl asked the saint to pet him too. Our heroine said that she would pet him now. Just after touching him, she commented in bewilderment on how soft his fur was. However, continuing to pet this cute little dog, the girl understood that he was cute and clean. At this moment, the screams of Jessie Fautra began to be heard, running and calling for Lady Emilian. Coming closer, she said that she came for Chung-ena, but she couldn't help but be surprised that there really was a dog there. The girl asked with tears in her eyes if she would really return alone. Our heroine told her that she had to change clothes and eat. As hard as it was to say goodbye, the girl waved to the dog one last time, saying that they would see each other again soon. Our heroine then told the dog that their Chung was very cute. She wanted to play some more, but she overcame herself. Anyway, she petted the dog again, saying that he was still a cutie, but his family was probably worried about him. Emilian suggested that they look for his family together, but at that very moment the dog began to run away. Our heroine, of course, began to follow him. The dog eventually ran into the garden. The dog happily ran away from her, but at some point he noticed Emilian and instantly turned around, running towards her. The dog barked happily and licked Emilian's face, who laughed and asked him to stop. At that moment, Prince Casadora Macron loomed over her, asking in bewilderment what they were doing there. Our heroine, seeing the prince's face, was incredibly scared. "This is all we need." She greeted His Highness shyly. She hoped that he did not think that the saint had gone crazy and completely forgotten all the rules. However, at that moment, the guy grabbed the dog, as it seemed at first glance, and threw it out. Our heroine jumped up in horror and asked what he was doing. Casadora began to say that not only had he entered the sanctuary, but he had also tried to seduce the saint. He looked at the boy and told him to get up. Emilian wondered in confusion, did the dog really turn into a human before her eyes? The guy immediately smiled sweetly and began to apologize for his rudeness. However, our heroine was very angry. That cute charmer actually turned out to be a huge boor. However, the guy said that it was a great honor for him to meet her. His name is Unterven. Emilian was shocked that he had already forgotten everything. In any case, she introduced herself, saying that she was the owner of the sanctuary and was glad to meet him. However, she looked at him and said that it was the first time she had heard of anyone from Turvan County being able to turn into an animal. Casadora Macron told the girl that Unterven is a beast man. He is a half-breed. That's why he can change from human to animal and vice versa. As she knows, mixing blood is considered a very delicate matter. That's why few people know about it, but he still trusts her. So he decided to explain everything. So he has an extremely unique build. Anyway, she said she understood how he was transforming, but she didn't hear the reason for his visit to the shrine. The boy said that the crown prince had come to find him, but he could also explain his animal appearance. He justified it by saying that he just wanted to have fun. At the same time, he smiled sweetly. Our heroine forced a smile thinking about how annoying he was. The guy said that when he saw a girl at the entrance to the sanctuary, he decided to have some fun with her. Everyone knows how much children adore dogs. And yet it was true. Chang'ena was very happy. It would have been even better if he hadn't attacked her like that. In any case, he said that he wanted to meet her since he had not had the opportunity before. He was curious to know her personally, given the rumors that were going around. Emilian asked if that was all he wanted to know. The guy smiled and said that was all. Our heroine turned to Unterven and said whether she considered this kind of behavior impolite or whether she had the wrong sources. The guy nodded and said that she had been trained correctly. If she wanted to punish him, he would agree to anything. Was Emilian surprised by his frivolity, or did he think she wouldn't dare do anything to him? If he has really heard of her, he knows that she is not as kind as the previous saints. What is this strange certainty? The crown prince suddenly said that while she was thinking he would get to the reason for his visit, Emilian asked in surprise if he hadn't come for him. The guy said he was just drawn into his adventure, but holding out the box, he said it was the real reason. He opened it, and our heroine looked at it in surprise and asked what it was. Casadora Macron said that he had taken her handkerchief at a hunting tournament. Unfortunately, her scarf was badly damaged, so it couldn't be returned in that condition, which means he's giving a new one. Next, he spoke about the treatment he received at the sanctuary. He wanted to express his sincere gratitude. Our heroine smiled and told him it wasn't worth it. Still, it was unexpected. At what point did the crown prince become so considerate? In any case, she said she would be even happier if he would warn her about his visits in advance. The guy said that insisted on coming today. In that case, the girl decided that they were very close. By the way, the county of Turvan supports the crown prince. Turvan suddenly asked His Highness if he had really decided to push everything onto him. Then he asked who was sitting there dressed up with a box in his hands when he, shutting his friend's mouth, the guy apologized again for their unexpected visit, and he would take care of punishing this fool so she needn't worry. Finally, he turned around and said that they would pass but would still see each other at the goddess festival. Emilian smiled and wished them a good journey. She didn't want to meet that swindler from Turvan anymore anyway. The action takes us to Unterven, who burst into the building and told the esteemed king that he had returned. The man asked him not to say that, because if someone heard him, they would misunderstand. The guy said that he knew this room was under the influence of protective magic. Unterven smiled and asked if he was not interested in anything. The man said that he was behaving in such a way that he even became curious. The guy with the tie and shirt looked at and asked who this saint really was. Goddess Festival. This is a celebration to thank the goddess who gave life to the earth and heavens and to ask for her blessings. This festival is held once every 5 years and lasts for a whole week. During this period, even conflicting countries must conclude a peace agreement. Many consider this festival to be very significant, and for our heroine as a saint, this is a very significant event. Although she may hold a title and be an ordinary person on the day of the festival, she becomes the incarnation of God. That's why everyone gathered to prepare her for the event. The girl was already tired of asking them not to overdo it. However, not only the aristocrats but the emperor himself bows his knee before her. According to aristocratic etiquette, the saint had to cover her face. At this point, Lenevin addressed her, reminding her about her face. She can't show herself as a commoner. However, she said that it was okay because today was dedicated to her. That's why she asked if he could support her in everything she would do today. The guy said that he always follows her orders. Emilian smiled and told him that he is a kind person. Suddenly, someone pushed a little girl who was standing in the crowd of people and looking towards Emilian. The girl fell to the ground and the people around her began to ask in bewilderment what was happening. At that moment, one of the guys screamed and asked the commoner in bewilderment how she dared to block his path. The girl tried to say something, but she couldn't. The guy grabbed her and asked her what she was mumbling about, and soon after that, he told her to get out of there. The little girl was saying that she was in pain. Our heroine noticed everything that was happening at that very moment, so she ordered the march to be stopped. After getting out of the carriage, Our heroine told Lenevin that she had a request. She asked to stop all the fuss and bring the child to her right now. The guy said that he understood her, so he would be back in a few moments. At this time, the man continued to scream and pull the little girl along with him. He was incredibly angry that she managed to ruin such an important day for him. However, Lenevin came running at that moment and ordered the man to let the child go immediately. The guy's face immediately changed upon seeing the high priest. Lenevin asked him if he saw that the march had been stopped. Svyata was extremely displeased with his actions. However, the man shouted and said that this was the real culprit. He wanted to take her away so that she would not get in the way. Lenevin told him to shut his mouth anyway. He remembered his face and the uniform of his squad, so he told him to go back to his place. Almost with tears in his eyes, he began to run away, and Lenevin turned to the girl and asked her to come to him. After some time, the guy came to the saint together with the girl whom he took. Our heroine said that he had done a good job, and soon looked at the girl and asked her name. The girl was silent when suddenly Lenevin told her that the saint had asked a question, so she had to answer. The girl was very scared. Emilian turned to the assistant and said that she did not ask to be brought in so that she could greet her properly. And again, our heroine said that they could try again. She asked if the girl could tell her name. Our heroine touched her face. The girl shyly said that her name was Devil. Emilian smiled and told her that her name translates as the sacred sound of a bell. At the shrine, her name would be appreciated. The girl, on the contrary, said that many laughed at the name. Our heroine was surprised by this, but in response, she said that she really liked this name. Next, she decided to introduce herself, so she said her name was Emilian. A bird flying across the blue sky. This is how the saint's name is interpreted. Emilian, at that moment, handed the bottle to the girl. She then said that if Devil had any problems, she could come to the sanctuary and she would warn everyone in advance to open the door to a girl named Devil. After this, the girl turned to the saint and decided to thank her for protecting them every time. Our heroine was very surprised that she decided to tell her this, but soon said that she was not worth thanking. Then she got out of the carriage and suggested that Lenevin get out of the carriage and walk to the palace. The guy agreed. There is power in words, after all. Walking past the crowd of people, our heroine hoped that each of them would find their happiness. Emilian believed that her sincerity would touch their souls and they would change. The action moves forward some time. Our heroine was already sitting in her chair. At this moment, one of the aristocratic families approached God's grace and greeted her kindly. Emilian had heard that the aristocrats' behavior had changed dramatically, and now she was convinced of it herself. The girl wished them God's blessing. What is more surprising is that not everyone's eyes were filled with fear like some. On the contrary, there is also a large part who looks at her with genuine admiration. Emilian said that now there is no one except the members of the imperial family who could be above them. That is why His Majesty worries about their every move and deeds in the sanctuary. Thanks to them, no one would dare to go against the sanctuary. Emilian was glad that Lenevin realized how underestimated the temple had been until now. Anyway, she said that the sanctuary has absolute power as long as God is on their side. It seemed strange to try to attack a tiger cub without knowing how dangerous it could be. Lenevin assumed that there would be no more people who would try to harm the sanctuary. Our heroine answered him that she had already answered his question. For many generations, the throne has belonged to one family, the emperor of the Vesaloyal Empire. If they expand the power that they have maintained all this time, they will be destined to meet someone who wants to do harm. At this point, our heroine remembered Lady Nestro, so she asked where she was. The guy said he didn't know, but if she had arrived, she would have come up to say hello. Then he asked why she was looking for him. Emilian looked at him in surprise and said that she was talking about him. Would he like to meet her? The guy asked again in confusion and then said that he didn't want to. Why did she think that? Emilian thought for a moment, and Jessie Fautre asked him directly if he liked Lady Nestro. The guy looked at her in bewilderment and asked Jessie Fautre to refrain from such statements. The girl immediately apologized. Anyway, the guy said that all this is in the past. Now he doesn't want to deal with her. Emilian was shocked by this answer. She asked him if he didn't love her. Lenevin continued asking if Lady Emilian was there too. Were his feelings really so weak that he could so easily give up on love and not even think about it? She immediately dismissed this thought because she was sure that he had serious feelings. But why then was he not happy? At that very moment, our heroine interrupted her thoughts because she suddenly felt an intoxicating aroma. The girl immediately turned to her assistants and asked if they could smell a sweet smell. They didn't understand what they were talking about, and this surprised our heroine. After all, the aroma was strong. At this moment, while our heroine was looking around the room, she noticed a very strange incident. The man grabbed the guy and started to pull him into the room. Our heroine instantly jumped up from the throne, not even understanding what was happening there. The girl ran down without explanation, and in response to Leniven's puzzled questions, told him to bring 2 knights and follow her. At that moment, she opened the curtains just as the man was shouting at the boy. The saint burst into the room and asked in bewilderment what was going on. "Is everything okay?" Instantly, the guy who could be seen at the very beginning of the story was very happy to see the saint who came here. Our heroine couldn't take her eyes off him. She didn't think there was anyone more beautiful than the children of the Nestro family. However, what is she thinking about? She needs to come to her senses. She immediately ordered the knights to seize this man. While the man was screaming in confusion and asking what was going on, Lady Emilian approached the guy and asked if he was okay. At that moment, she noticed his jacket, which had some kind of royal emblem on it. She didn't know what country it belonged to, but most likely this guy was a prince. Nevertheless, he apologized for creating a fuss. Our heroine said that he had nothing to apologize for, but he still started talking about the fact that today was the first day of the festival. Emilian asked him not to worry and to go out. If he did it quickly and carefully, then no one would notice him. She assured him that everything was fine now. Our heroine stood up, not understanding why she began to feel dizzy. Anyway, she turned to Leniven and asked the high priest to get this guy out of here. They soon left, and the Marquis of Cheverly at that moment was on his knees, asking forgiveness from the saint, saying that a mistake had been made. The man said he was a little drunk and had confused his opponent, in which case Emilian assumed he had meant to do this to someone else. Soon after, our heroine nodded her head and approached His Highness. The guy asked what happened, but she immediately said that the Marquis of Cheverly had caused a stir. It was at least ugly towards the guests who came to celebrate the goddess festival. The girl looked at him and told the crown prince that on this special day they could not allow such a thing to happen. The guy nevertheless sighed and said that it was only his mistake. Emilian asked in surprise if this was enough to settle such a stupid situation. The boy turned to the knights and ordered them to seize the Marquis of Cheverly and take him to the underground prison. And again the man began to scream in horror, asking them to wait and talk to him. It was just a small mistake. They began to take him away, but he still shouted, saying that he did not want to insult the saint. Our heroine sighed, but seeing Leniven, she asked if he had led him away. The guy said he left him in the hallway with a servant, and he must have already reached his carriage. Oh, but Emilian wanted to listen to the victim. One way or another, it was necessary to interrogate the Marquis of Cheverly first. The girl turned to Jessie and asked if she recognized the guy. She replied that she remembered this family. If she was not mistaken, then this was the prince of the Ace Kingdom. The Kingdom of Ace means, in that case, the girl decided that it was high time to go down to the prison. Meanwhile, the man continued to shout loudly, saying that it was an accident. He continued to shout and ask for mercy because this would never happen again. Jessie Fautre suddenly said that this was an omission. Emilian asked again. The girl said that she had heard that the Marquis of Cheverly liked to play with children, not with adults. She said that the omission was precisely in the fact that the guy was quite an adult man, albeit a very handsome one. Our heroine asked in bewilderment about the children. Jessie explained that the Marquis always took children from commoner families or orphans of about 10 years old. When she found out about it, there were 14 of them, and of course this man brought them to him not with the best intentions. Emilian then asked Leniven why this man was not listed when the sanctuary investigated. The guy replied that the Marquis supported all the children. Our heroine began to laugh. Do they really mean to say that if it weren't for the Marquis, these children would have died of hunger or infection? She had overlooked it since it involved children from the slums. It was no wonder they hadn't paid enough attention. Soon, our heroine asked Leniven and Jessie to leave the room. The guys were a little surprised. Either way, they did not disobey the saint's order, so she was left alone with the Marquis's 14 children. That means, at such a young age, they suffered a terrible trauma, perhaps without even realizing it. No matter how hard it was for them, They continued to blame themselves for their helplessness. These thoughts consumed them completely, and it was disgusting. She instantly grabbed him by the collar, saying that knowing the truth, she would never leave this matter alone. Cheverly was perplexed and said that these were ordinary commoners, so they shouldn't care about such non-entities. Our heroine told him that he had a hidden talent for making people lose their temper. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Of course, Emilian is not stupid, so she immediately let go of the Marquis of Cheverly. At that moment, the same guy entered the room, prematurely asking for forgiveness. He introduced himself as Alois. Our heroine introduced herself in response and then asked why and how he ended up there. The guy said that he was the reason she had problems, so he decided to visit her. However, the boy said that the kingdom would not forgive the Marquise's sins, so she should not have interfered in this matter herself. This was unexpected because she thought that he was the type who avoided conflicts. Then it was possible not to interfere in the prince's affairs. Our heroine still said that she would not interfere with them, so the guy thanked her. Soon after, he asked if she would allow him to visit the shrine. Emilian certainly didn't expect such a request, but she smiled nonetheless and said that he could come whenever he wanted. Alois thanked her and said that he would warn her in advance of his visit. At that moment, he started to leave, but our heroine smelled a strange smell, so she grabbed his hand. Their eyes met, but soon he tripped and knocked her to the ground. They looked at each other in bewilderment. The guy immediately jumped up and said that he was very sorry that this happened, so he asked for forgiveness. He held out his hand and asked if she was okay, but Emilian wondered to herself, was he feigning awkwardness? Our heroine also decided to play a little, so she extended her hand and embarrassedly said that everything was fine. Again, he reminded her that she wanted to see him on some matter. Emilian immediately remembered this. She said that at the banquet she smelled a sweet aroma and thought it was coming from him. What would he say to that? Alois was confused and a little puzzled, asked her again. Soon he turned around and said that he was not sure and he was sorry. Our heroine was surprised by his reaction, but still said that she was most likely mistaken, so he could go ahead. He came out shortly after that, and Emilian didn't even expect him to avoid answering so easily. The prince may have appeared as a shy fawn, but what kind of beast lurks within him? She was quite interested in why he wore a mask, but still the question was not an easy one. After some time, our heroine ordered the title to be annulled and that freak to be sent into exile. She explained her words by saying that the Marquis of Cheverly should get what he deserved. Even if someone was against it, the order had to be carried out. She then ordered the Marquis's men to be moved to the temple. Jessie Fautre turned to Lady Emilian in confusion. After all, the kingdom of Issei could ask for the appropriate credentials. Emilian said they would most likely do so. However, she intends to punish the Marquis for using children in his dirty games. In that case, Jessie Fautre advised to think it over again. His Majesty would certainly not punish the Marquis for this reason. Emilian said she understood her worries. Many aristocrats had fallen because of her, and it all seemed like chaos. But when stability was needed, no one would resort to arms. Moreover, she looked around and said that everyone believed that the Marquis's deeds would not be made public. Anyway, she went to Jessie Fautre and said that she couldn't think like that. He brought her home, fed her, and put her to bed. Could this atone for all her sins? Emilian feared that the price the Marquis had to pay was too high. For this reason alone, our heroine did not see any reason for leniency. Jessie Fautre now understood Emilian's persistence, so she apologized to the lady and said that she understood. Just at that moment, the Emperor appeared, who, as planned, said that those children were commoners, so there was no need to get angry over trifles. Emilian wanted to say something, but the Emperor interrupted her, saying that they had many foreign ambassadors visiting them, so it was better not to undermine the authority of the empire with trifles. Well, the Emperor. Currently the only existing ruler of Vesaloil, he is the most influential figure here with the exception of Emilian. She is already tired of hearing and seeing such behavior from influential people. We can't leave power to such a scoundrel. That's why the ruler needs to be changed, so that power can pass to her. Emilian said with disdain that she now understands how his beloved Majesty thinks. All the people exclaimed in bewilderment, and at that moment the Emperor calmly asked the saint what she had just said. The girl asked, what was the matter? Did her address really hurt him? During the festival, she had the highest status. Then she smiled and asked if she really should switch to informal address. The emperor immediately shouted and told her to stop being rude. Emilian told him in response that if he was not happy with something, then first he should work on his manners. Our heroine knew that she needed a higher position. She wanted to see the ideal emperor before her. However, she was afraid to take responsibility, so she began to look after a small temple. If she had been born here, would she have been a little braver? Anyway, she said that no one would raise the issue, so all she needed from the ruler was one thing: the fulfillment of his moral duty. The man asked again in surprise. The girl said that in the law of the empire there is no clause about causing harm to commoners, representatives of secular society, and there is also no clause about impunity. She knew that her decisions were more likely influenced by the fact that she was from another world. Our heroine looked at him and said one thing. In her opinion, the state can only be governed by a highly moral person who is capable of creating the points she mentioned. The man sighed and asked her not to overdo it, but she decided to repeat it again. She said she was no longer going to indulge in laissez-faire behavior, letting crimes go unpunished by those who live and play on the city's taxes. The emperor was incredibly angry and watched the saint with fury in his eyes, not understanding what she was allowing herself to do. Meanwhile, the action takes us outside. After such negotiations, Emilian happily enjoyed the night air. At this point, Lenevin caught up with Lady Emilian in horror. Our heroine asked where Jessifatra had gone. The guy said he would bring her, but our heroine said that there was no need to do this because she was sure that she needed time to come to her senses. She may have done what a saint should not do, namely crossed the very sun of the empire, but she is a saint nonetheless. With her godly power, she wants to help people who are at rock bottom, help them rise up. Our heroine looked into Lenevin's eyes and asked if this was the saint's mission. Anyway, she said that it was time for them to go back, but there was no need to worry about her. Finally, the girl said that he could calmly catch up with everyone else. Soon he followed her with his gaze. Suddenly he grabbed his chest and said that this is why he loves Lady Emilian so much. The very next morning, the girl woke up thinking that it was not in vain that she went to bed early, because her fatigue disappeared as if by magic. During the festival, most of the time should be spent in the imperial palace, but she stayed in the temple, of course, because of yesterday. Although Lenevin still copes with the assignments perfectly well without her, so it was worth doing her own thing. After some time, she was holding in her hands the Imperial Code of Laws, which was quite heavy, although this is not surprising. Anyway, most of this book is about aristocrats exploiting common people. There are simply no words. She needed to make sure that none of them could manipulate the people any more as they pleased. That is why she had to supplement all the articles of the code with suitable points. Sighing, she decided that most likely she would spend the entire festival just messing around with them. Anyway, she took the book, so she decided that she should go to the bedroom and study the book properly there. After a while, our heroine began to climb the steps, holding the book tightly. Unexpectedly, she accidentally tripped and soon realized that she was falling down. The girl was already preparing herself for how badly she would get hurt, but at that moment, someone caught her. Alois, perplexed, said that she should be more careful because it was extremely dangerous. Then he asked if she was hurt. Our heroine turned to him in surprise, and the guy said that he was glad that she remembered him. Nevertheless, she was curious about what he was doing here, especially without servants. In any case, she thanked him for his help. The guy looked down embarrassed and said that he would only be happy to help her. And again, she felt the same dizzying feeling as last time. Pulling herself together, Emilian asked him how he ended up there. The guy said that he had an important promise to fulfill. Emilian assumed he was there because of the news of the prince's arrival. She then asked him why he was alone. The guy said that, to tell the truth, he is not very much loved by the royal family. He bowed again, saying that he should apologize to her for his ignorance. He had intended to keep his visit to the temple a secret from his father. The girl immediately decided that it was a lie. So far, she has not been able to make inquiries about him, but the fact remains he is hiding something. She decided that she should try to play along with him and find out the reason Emilian apologized, saying that she had touched on an uncomfortable topic. However, she still decided to ask why he was not accompanied by servants. The guy said that they accompanied him, but in the temple he, without noticing it, separated from them. Our heroine pretended to believe him. Does he really want her to believe his words? Just when the girl decided that his excuse was a little unfinished, her gaze suddenly turned downwards. Noticing the leg that was missing a leg, she was puzzled. When did he disappear? Then she began to analyze how she looked in general, unwashed, disheveled, and in a nightgown. Realizing that this was an incredible shame, she decided that she needed to run away from here as quickly as possible. However, at that moment Prince Alois sat down and asked for forgiveness. He put a slipper on her foot. Immediately after this, he stood up and, picking up the book, asked to be allowed to accompany her to the room. Now it was time to pretend that she had come to her senses. Emilian thanked him sheepishly. The guy smiled, and after they walked forward, our heroine picked up one piece. Now she was absolutely sure that the prince was seducing her. However, in reality, he was not in love, but only pretending to be. One way or another, our heroine asked herself only one question: what does he want from her? And, surprisingly, the answer didn't take long to come. The guy suddenly turned to Emilian and said that he needed her help. Of course, the first thing our heroine did was ask in bewilderment what the request for help was. The guy said that he understood that they were not particularly close, so he could not feel ashamed to ask her for help. Emilian asked him not to say that she wanted to know why he had come so far. That's why she asked him to let go of his worries. Soon a smile appeared on his face. Our heroine immediately assumed that the prince thought that she had fallen for his trick. In that case, she needed to continue playing along. The guy said that he had learned that Ese wanted to revive slavery. Our heroine was shocked by these words. As far as she knew, the previous saint had cancelled it. The guy said that it was, but since she was no longer alive, the father was trying to get things back to normal. It can't be. Emilian didn't know that such chaos was going on outside the empire. Anyway, the guy raised his head again and said that as she could guess he was against the slave system. Emilian was surprised. Is this really true? Or is this another set of false words? Alois continued to say that he was only the fourth prince, and that his older brother, the main heir, shared his father's opinion. He heard that the previous saint had a hard time getting slavery abolished. If that system were to return to their kingdom, it would be scary to imagine what would happen. Other states will immediately stir, so he tells this because he expects them to adhere to the same position. The guy bowed down again and asked the saint to help him. Our heroine thought about it. Help from the saint means, as God's trustee, she does not belong to any state. In other words, she must take care not only of the empire, but also of other lands. She knew that interest in the slave system had not died out, but then the prince said that his kingdom wanted to revive it on its own. Alois at this point said that he was ashamed that being a prince he could not do anything. Our heroine couldn't understand whether his strength was really insufficient or whether he had something in mind. Either way, she said she understood him. That's why she said she would help his state. The guy jumped up and asked in bewilderment if it was true. Our heroine told him that she saw no point in lying to him, as he said they had the same position. In order to find out what was on the mind of such a complex opponent, it was worth letting him get as close as possible. After some time, the prince left, so it was time to meet the person who was simply necessary in her future affairs. Hearing no response after knocking, our heroine sighed and told Jessie that she was coming in. Opening the door, she noticed a completely dark room in which Jessie Fatra was sitting on her bed. Our heroine asked why she was crying, but the girl began to apologize and say that she shouldn't have spoken to her like that. However, Emilian hugged the girl and asked her to stop crying because she was not right about everything either. The girl wanted to say something, but our heroine interrupted her and asked if she knew why she started screaming. Looking down, she said that her subjects were more important to her than the authority of the empire or the temple. Emilian smiled and said that it was true. She was very smart, and she believed that she would understand everything right away. However, our heroine decided to ask if her anger was a mistake. Jessie jumped up and said that it was not. Our heroine asked why not if she did not agree. Jessie Fotra lowered her gaze and said that she did not agree at the time, but she ordered the children whom the Marquise kept locked up to be brought. When confronted by these children in the temple, the girl immediately realized the reason for Emilian's anger. Still shaking with fear and guilt, she said that that was why she was to blame. Next, our heroine asked Jessie what she would do if the saint's path turned out to be wrong. The girl said that the reason she, a renegade, was still alive was because she, Lady Emilian, had accepted her here. That's the only reason she said she would support whatever decision Emilian made. Our heroine smiled and told her that it was wrong. Her job had not changed at all. If Jessie thought she was doing the wrong thing, she asked to convince our heroine otherwise. Looking at the tearful Jessie Fatra, our heroine asked her if she understood these words. The girl smiled and said that she understood. Meanwhile, the third day of the festival had already arrived. Emilian was having breakfast. But at that moment, a letter was brought to her from the county of Nestro. Then she raised her head and realized that she had come along with this letter. Lunella Nestro smiled sweetly at the saint and greeted her. The letter had been sent in advance, and she had only arrived very quickly. Emilian knew that she was better off than she had been at the hunting tournament, judging by the fact that she had sent a letter. Anyway, she said she was glad to see him and asked the reason for the visit. The girl said that she heard rumors about what happened on the first day of the festival, so she was worried and decided to visit Emilian. Our heroine smiled and said that everything was fine, but she was grateful for the concern. Then she invited her to sit down. Lunella told the saint that she could call her at any time if she needed someone to talk to, and she would gladly accept the offer. Our heroine said that it would be a sin to refuse such an offer, but nevertheless she did not dare take it away from the others. Once again, Nella reminded of her smile while telling Lady Emilian that everything is fine because being next to her is real happiness for her. However, during the last appointment she realized many things. For example, that she would not allow anyone to be near her. So she wanted to know if she could still consider herself even a little bit special to Emilian after all. Our heroine said that if she says so, then she should think carefully about this issue. Soon after, she got up from the table and said that she needed to step away for a moment. After stepping away for a bit, our heroine began to think that something similar had already happened. From that moment until this day, does Lunella Nestro really want to gain power over her too? She assumed that, like other aristocrats, she was disliked. However, now she understood that the situation was rather ambiguous. As soon as our heroine had put herself in order after a while, she returned to the gazebo. At that moment, she noticed an interesting picture. Lunella Nestro was standing over a broken vase and was saying in bewilderment that this was too much. Emilian didn't understand. Did her guest break a vase? At that moment, the girl was saying that I didn't do everything right for her. Whether it was a prince, a duke, or a saint, for some reason everyone had a reaction that was not what she wanted to see. She always felt uncomfortable here. Soon after, she began to repair the vase with her magic. Was Lady Nestro a mage? Although it is possible because her older brother is a mage. However, she did not understand why she was hiding her power, but at that moment the girl called her name. She only said the name to our heroine and she was already uncomfortable. One way or another, Lunella was perplexed and asked where the saint was walking. At this moment, our heroine decided to pretend that she was approaching, so the girl immediately heard footsteps. Seeing Emilian, the girl instantly smiled and happily said that she had been waiting for her. Our heroine apologized for keeping her waiting. Nella told her that everything was fine. While she was away, she admired the beautiful garden. Well, he lies like he breathes. Nevertheless, she told Emilian that this garden is the pride of the temple. The past saint worked on it for a very long time. At that moment, Jessie Fatra, who had been calling the lady and telling her something about the crown prince, screamed in horror. The guy was behind Jessie at the time, so he immediately said hello, surprised that they were having tea. Lunella Nestro jumped up in bewilderment when she saw His Highness. Our heroine in turn asked what brought him here. The guy said that even at the festival it was impossible to keep up with her. Emilian told him that she had a lot to do. And again she approached him asking the question once more, what was the reason for the sudden visit? Casadora said that there was a conversation. He immediately apologized for coming unannounced. He was afraid that she would refuse the meeting if he sent a letter. Emilian decided that this was a silly excuse, but said that she would make tea for them, so she asked what kind of tea they wanted. Lunella Nestro advised His Highness to drink Esfol. This healing tea is only available in the temple and is said to have a simply amazing aroma. Casadora asked the saint what she drank. As soon as Emilian said that she drank herbal tea, not Esfol, the guy asked for herbal tea. She warned him that he might not like it, but the guy said that he didn't care. In that case, the saint asked him to sit down. After a while, she brought tea, and the prince began to talk about when she had a fight with his father. Emilian realized that they were talking about the first day of the festival, and it was strange that in his eyes it looked like a quarrel. The girl said that they simply did not agree on the issue. The guy then offered to apologize because his father did not want discord. He lacks sympathy because, after all, he is responsible for a huge state. That is why he would like the saint to forgive him, and at this moment our heroine interrupted him. She immediately slammed the table, saying that if he came here for this, then he had better leave. The guy looked down guiltily and said that if that was the saint's wish, then that's what he would do. Our heroine was surprised that he just gave in. Didn't he come to convince her? Lunella Nestro at that moment told His Highness that the smell was strange. Was he really going to drink this tea? The guy came closer and sniffed it. Soon he said that the aroma was really unusual. Emilian didn't know that he would like this tea. In that case, she took out some candies and happily said that he could have them too because they tasted the same. They improve concentration and clear the mind. It is enough to eat just one candy. These are the same candies that Jesse and Lenovan won. She beat him pretty well, but it was a shame about the candy. The guy looked at the jar in surprise and asked if the saint really liked that. Our heroine confidently said yes, she does. Soon, she asked him if he didn't like it. The prince handed the candies to his assistant and said that he hadn't tried them yet. However, he said that he might still like them as the process progresses. Our heroine looked at him in surprise, not understanding what had happened to him. At that very moment, tragedy struck. The prince's assistant dropped the jar from his hands and soon it fell to the ground and broke. The boy, horrified, began to scream that he did not do it on purpose, but Casadora Macron told him that he dared to spoil the saint's gift, so he would be punished with a whip. Nevertheless, the boys fell to the floor where the broken glass lay and began to tell His Highness that they were very sorry. The prince asked the other assistants in surprise what they were waiting for. The two culprits were immediately seized, despite how much they begged. Our heroine looked at him and asked him to order His Highness to make the knights leave. The guy still said that the incident would be punished in the imperial palace. He did not intend to tarnish the temple's reputation. However, the girl stood her ground and said that it was only a jar that had broken, so there was no need to be angry. The prince answered her that they had broken what belonged to him. She knew well that mistakes had to be paid for. Emilian was surprised that the prince wanted to equate the broken jar with the crimes of her acquaintance, for which she demanded punishment. At the reception, he showed that he knew how to retreat, so she considered him a little better than the emperor, but still, if this was the only way he could understand, then she decided to play along with him once again. Emilian suddenly told him that she was disappointed in him. The guy turned to her in surprise and asked what it meant. Our heroine said that she felt like she asked him to call off the knights. The fact that he is now being familiar with her does not mean that he is allowed to go against his will. At that moment, Lunella Nestro began to scream in tears and ask them not to fight. It's hard for her to watch them quarrel, and her heart is already breaking from the fact that the saint's gift is broken. However, since the services have caused harm to His Highness, would it not be right for him to decide their future fate? Emilian was surprised. Nella is quite smart and cruel. She did not expect this from her. However, Casadora said that Lunella was right who gave the saint the right to interfere in her affairs. Our heroine turned around and reminded him that his business was connected with her gift. Soon she asked the two guys their names. The boys said with trembling voices that the first one was called Tesh Oshop and the second one was Florent Realta. Our heroine understood that they were afraid. They were afraid that she would be angry. That's why they were so nervous when they said their names. Emilian looked at Tesh and asked who he had in his family. The guy said that he had a father, an aunt, and 3 nephews. She wanted to know more about them. The guy said that the father was not feeling well and the aunt could not walk, so he was raising his nephews. There was a big age difference between them. So not all the heir's servants are wealthy aristocrats. She then looked at Florent and asked, what about him? The guy said that he had a mother, father, and a younger sister. Dad works as a senior servant, so he decided to follow in his footsteps. The younger sister plans to get married in a month. Emilian thanked them for their sincerity. Soon, she asked His Highness whether the stories of these people had inspired any thoughts. The prince said he didn't understand what she was getting at. Our heroine said that one would have to be slow-witted not to understand that. Didn't he remember her conversation with the Majesty? Casadora asked how this was connected. His servants broke the jar of sweets that she, Emilian, told him that she could give him 100 sweets. However, she wanted to convey to him that a lost person cannot be brought back. Casadora Macron looked at her and added that he was not going to kill these guys. The whip was a rather mild punishment. Our heroine did not listen to his words and still insisted that he pardon his servants. She decided to repeat that if he lost a person by torturing his flesh or heart, then the end would come. As he remembered, she wanted to see a ruler who knew morality on the throne, and therefore she wanted him, the future emperor, to understand the basics necessary for a leader. Soon she poured out the tea and asked the prince to reflect on what makes a ruler a ruler. The boy answered her that in the Imperial Academy, softness is frowned upon because the ruler must always demonstrate his greatness. He told her that she should know that subjects need a strong hand from the ruler. Emilian told him she doubted it. If he believed that a ruler's strength was demonstrated by suppressing the weak, she wondered how many would follow him. Not only does he have loved ones, but the people also have their own families and soulmates. This is why perhaps His Highness should treat people with kindness. The guy wanted to say something in response, but he still gritted his teeth and silently turned around. Lanella Nestro watched Her Highness leave and called out to him in surprise. Soon the girl asked for forgiveness from Mrs. Emilian and said that she would send her a message next time. At this moment, the servants of the Crown Prince decided to bow before the saint and thank her. The girl told them that if the situation worsened, they could report it to the temple. The boys sheepishly said that they were fine and would go. Actions are brought to the evening. Jesse Fotra said that Alois Ese is currently the 4th Ese prince. His mother was of the Istian line, which meant the prince had little chance of claiming the throne. Emilian asked what kind of race they were, to which the maid replied that they were a tribe of thieves wandering around the western part of the kingdom. However, she then said that she had learned something interesting, namely that Duchess Nestro was King Ese's younger sister. Our heroine was perplexed. Judging from this information, it turns out that Prince Alois is Lonella and Veron's cousin. After some time, there was another meeting with Alois, who greeted the saint. Our heroine smiled at him and said that God's blessing would come to him. She greeted him. The guy took Emilian's hand and kissed it, thanking her for the warm welcome. He soon said that he understood that his request might seem difficult to her. Our heroine remembered that she had promised to prevent the restoration of the slave system, but they had not discussed the details, which is why he came. The guy suddenly said that he was ready to pay a decent price since he was turning to her, and not to just anyone. Emilian asked, what about the price? Does he really want to give something in return? If once again the conversation was about money or exquisite delicacies or even charming jewelry, then such boring gifts will disappoint her. At that moment, the boy knelt down and asked the saint to help him become king. Our heroine asked what he was talking about, and he said that he was far inferior to other contenders for the throne, so he could not do without her help. Emilian decided that he was right, and also that Alois knew one thing very well. Only she could help him without discrediting his status. The guy said that her decisions come first for him, and it would be much easier for her to create the state she wanted if they acted together. Leaning towards her, he said that he would give her everything she wanted, even the state. That is why he approached her and asked if she would allow him to serve her. Our heroine understood that if the kingdom of Ase came into her possession, it would become the inviolable property of the temple, and then a sacred state would be born. But at that moment she decided to tell His Highness that this was quite a tempting offer. However, she could not agree because, in her opinion, they were not yet familiar enough to solve such serious problems together. She asked for a little more time, and soon he agreed. Thus the prince left empty-handed. However, the very next day a miracle happened. An orphanage opened at the church. Lenevin stood at the entrance and controlled all the children. The guy told everyone to come in one by one. The joyful children shouted and said that they understood the high priest perfectly. In that case, he said that they could go in, and a moment later all the children ran inside in a crowd. After a while they were inside. The children were surprised that it was so clean and spacious. There were even a whole bunch of beds, and very large ones. Next they noticed a huge dining room in which they would definitely fit everything. Our heroine was very happy that the children liked her gift. However, the girl's joy ended as soon as Alois appeared behind her greeting the saint. Our heroine asked what he was doing there, to which the guy said that he was extremely interested in the shelter, so he wanted to go inside. The girl said he could do it, but the children probably wouldn't show him the respect he deserved. Was he sure he wanted to? The guy said that this was his sincere desire because he does not boast about his status, and by the way, promises not to create any problems. In that case, our heroine agreed and said that she would warn everyone, and in the meantime he could look around the place. She didn't expect this turn of events, but perhaps this was a chance to get to know the prince better. At this moment, one of the girls managed to scratch her hand on a thorny bush. Our heroine approached Devil and began to heal her hand, asking if she liked the new house. The girl happily thanked Emilian for what she was doing and also asked if this was really her house. Emilian said that it was, and it was a home for other kids too. Until she grew up and got her life together, she would always be welcomed here. Devil asked in bewilderment if she really wouldn't have to wander anymore. Our heroine stroked her head and said that everything was correct, so she could rest easy. The girl screamed that she was very happy, and also that she loved this place, but she loved Emilian the most. After that, our heroine advised her to go and play with the others. That's exactly what Devil decided to do. It hadn't even been a day, but it seemed like many of the kids had settled in. Emilian was happy about that. However, at that moment, she noticed something strange ahead, or rather in the bushes. Soon our heroine approached them, and looking in, asked Chung Enna in bewilderment what she was doing there. The girl asked the girl not to sit there because she could get hurt, or the bugs could bite her, so it's better to get out of there. The girl nevertheless said that this was the only way they would not be able to find her. Our heroine sat down and asked in bewilderment who they were talking about. What was the matter? Chung Ina said that Cheryl and Roy have been fighting a lot lately, and she doesn't know whose side to take. She just wants to be alone. Soon after this story, a boy and a girl appeared, looked at Chung Enna in bewilderment, and asked what she was doing there. Nevertheless, the children immediately greeted the saint. Our heroine looked at them and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The girl wanted to ask them something, but at that moment, Roy told Chung to go play with him. Cheryl asked in confusion, "What about her, because he always offers all sorts of nonsense?" The guy asked in surprise, "Is it really not nonsense that she has?" And again, they collided with each other like a cat and a dog and began to quarrel. Emilian now understood what was going on. Both children wanted to play with Chung, but separately. This is why it becomes clear why the girl was so sad when she found her. Soon the boy and girl turned to Chung and told her to choose who she wanted to go out with. The girl did not know what was the best answer, so she was confused and stood silently. Our heroine decided that it looked cute from the outside, but Chung was truly confused. In any case, she decided that there was nothing she could do, so she decided to reconcile them. At that moment, the guy behind asked what happened. Our heroine wasn't even surprised that she saw Alois. It's good that he came. What will the prince advise them? Our heroine told us what the problem is. Soon, the boy thought Chung is of interest to two people, so it is necessary to set the situation in the right direction. Emilian said he got it right. The guy suddenly asked if he could talk to the kids. Our heroine was only glad about this, so she said that he could do it. Alois thanked her. The boy approached the children and asked the sons to pay some attention to their uncle. Holding a flower in his hands, he said it was an unopened flower. He would offer him to play as they offer Chungi. The boy placed the flower under the scarf and began to quote the children's words, "I like you, don't you like me too?" Then he wanted them to play only with him. Holding out a flower towards them, he said that this flower had withered. Cheryl asked Alois in surprise why this happened. The guy said that now they will find out the reason. "I don't like quarrels. I hate it when my opinion is not taken into account. I want to play together with everyone." The boys cried out in bewilderment, saying that this flower speaks. Is it really magic? In any case, Alois suggested that they do as their flower asked. Again, he placed the flowers under the handkerchief and said, "I'm sorry we were stupid. Let's play together." A moment later, he lifted the handkerchief, and underneath it, the boys saw beautifully opened peonies. The children ran up to the flowers in bewilderment and started talking about how this was real magic. Alois asked the children if he remembered correctly that their names were Roy and Cheryl. The children said yes, and then the prince introduced himself as Al. He explained that Chung's feelings were the same as those flowers. No matter how much they liked her, if they did not listen to her words, she would be very offended by them. Roy looked at Mr. Al in confusion and said that Chung is a human, and she didn't say that you don't like something. However, he decided to ask where Chung was now. The children looked at him in surprise and noticed that she was standing behind the saint. Alois said that it was true. This is how she shows that she is repulsed by everything that is happening. Looking at the children who felt guilty, he suggested that they remember what he had said to the flower to make it open. Roy and Cheryl both started saying that they listened to him first and did what he wanted. The prince told the children that everything was right. It is the same with people. If you love, you need to listen to the person and try to understand him. This is respect. The boys looked at each other and decided that they needed to apologize to Chung to show her their respect. They turned to their friend and apologized for acting so stupidly. Chung asked if they would fight again. Cheryl said for sure that they wouldn't, and Roy in turn said that he couldn't promise that, but for her sake, he promised to try. At that moment, Chung's expression instantly changed, and she said that she was extremely happy. Our heroine, meanwhile, was thinking that not every prince was capable of getting along so deftly with the children of commoners. Prince Alois, just because of this act, he just grew in Emilian's eyes. And soon the action brings us to the final day of the festival. Our heroine has told Lenevin everything. The guy asked in surprise if the prince was really kind. However, our heroine said that something else was important now. Picking up another letter, the girl asked Lenevin what he thought she would receive from the Duchy of Nestro today. The boy said that he understood that Prince Alois was polite with the children, but he thought it was dangerous to accept such sudden offers. He assumed that the prince was really only chasing the throne, but our heroine said that he apparently also wanted to seize the right to receive profits from the temple. In any case, it was not contrary to their interests, so there was no reason to conflict over it. Perhaps the prince's proposal could even play into their hands. Lenevin said in surprise that he didn't quite understand, and our heroine decided to reveal one secret to him. She smiled and said that she had planned something very interesting and also threatening. The guy asked in confusion what it meant. Our heroine said that she needed something from the man who wanted to get closer to her using Jesse. Lenevin immediately remembered the very incident when the presence of an anti-divine sect was discovered on the chandelier. The guy immediately asked the saint if she knew who the criminal was. Emilian said she had a guess. Lenevin began to shout angrily, saying that this scoundrel dared to encroach on the saint herself. Our heroine asked him to calm down. The situation did not allow him to be caught because there was no evidence, and it was necessary to preserve the image of the temple. Lenevin at that moment looked at the saint and asked her directly why she did not value herself so much. Our heroine, perplexed, asked what this meant, to which the guy said that for the sake of others she would throw herself into fire and water, but she did not take care of herself at all. Emilian smiled at him and said that it was not strange because she simply would not die. After some time, they finally arrived, so Lenevin came out first and offered his hand to Lady Emilian. Our heroine, getting out of the carriage, began to look around, and as always saw the displeased looks of the aristocrats. Nothing but disdainful glances, and the hostess who invited our heroine is nowhere to be seen. Lenevin leaned towards Lady Emilian and said that all the people were wary because of their latest conflict with the emperor. Our heroine understood this herself, so she suggested that he go inside anyway. After a while, Lunella Nestro met them at the door, saying that she was very happy to see them. Emilian thanked her for the invitation. The girl said that she assumed she was unwell because of the recent incident, but she was beautiful as always. Then the girl noticed the high priest, so she greeted him. Lenevin bowed and greeted her. The girl suddenly said that she understood that her reception might be far from ideal, but the guy interrupted her at that moment and said that everything was so since she had not bothered to go out and meet the saint. Next time he advised her to be more careful. Our heroine looked at her assistant in bewilderment and could not believe what Lenevin had just said to Lunella Nestro's face. At this time, the girl was quite shocked by what happened, but still said that she would remember. Our heroine decided to lighten the mood, so she told Lady Nestro that they hadn't had lunch yet. The girl happily said that she had already prepared everything so they could follow her. On the way, she said that her reception was extremely modest, so she did not expect to see them today, but what a joy that they still arrived. At that moment, one of the maids began to call for Mrs. Nestro in horror. Our heroine smelled the scent at that moment. A few seconds later, as soon as the maid said something to Lady Nestro, she turned to the saint and addressed her. Emilian asked what happened. The girl said, embarrassed, that she had been told that her cousin was currently sitting in the dining room. She assumed that it would be awkward for her to dine together, so she would ask him to leave. Our heroine immediately stopped her and said that it was not worth doing. Emilian said that everything was fine and that he was comfortable. Now our heroine understood why it smelled like that. After some time, they entered the room and found Alois, who was perplexed by the guests who had arrived. Emilian smiled at this meeting. Lunella Nestro asked the saint in bewilderment if they really knew each other. The guy came forward and said that they had met a few days ago and he had had a chance to talk to Milady. Our heroine smiled at him, saying that accidents sometimes happen. Lunella asked what they were talking about if it wasn't a secret. The boy smiled and said that the saint had helped him when the Marquise had set him up. Nella asked what it meant, but the guy said that this conversation should remain a secret. Lunella Nestro was puzzled and said that it was not fair. However, the guy said that she should pay attention to the saint, and indeed the girl apologized, saying that it would be better to start with a meal. After some time, they were sitting at the table and eating. Lunella Nestro asked our heroine if she liked the food. Our heroine smiled and told the hostess that the food was as amazing as before. The girl said it was wonderful and then asked Mr. Lenevin's opinion, and after him she asked if her brother liked it. The guy said he always liked his sister's food, but Lenevin said the smell was too strong and the meat was too tough. These words were an incredible shock for Nella. However, she sighed and said that she understood the guest's opinion, so she would order a new dish to be prepared. The guy, however, said that it was unnecessary because he had no right to complain when the saint was enjoying the food. Emilian didn't understand why the guy became so prickly with Nella. She decided that he completely changed his attitude towards her. In this case, our heroine decided to add a little fuel to the fire. At that very moment, she accidentally knocked over a glass of wine on herself. The boys jumped up in bewilderment and asked Mrs. Emilian if she was okay. Looking at such a violent reaction, the girl could not even imagine that the reaction would be like this. However, Alois immediately ran to her and gave her his jacket, assuming that she was very scared. Our heroine thanked him for his help, and Lenevin thought that it was the senior priest who should take care of the saint. Alois apologized for his unkempt robe as he had nothing else to offer. Lenevin, however, said that it was not the tidiness of the robe that was the problem, but its weight. Emilian noticed that the high priest was acting like a little child today. Alois suddenly asked them to wait. A little while he ordered a new outfit to be brought. Our heroine smiled and said that she would be very grateful. In that case, the task was completed. Thanks to this, she was once again convinced that the prince wanted to win her over. To get what she wants, Alois is affectionate with the children and takes care of her. Emilian couldn't help but notice that she likes this guy's impudence. At this point, our heroine turned to Lenevin and told him that she was going to accept the prince's offer, but why it was a secret. Anyway, she asked him to just trust her. The guy smiled at her and asked who else he should trust if not her. After some time, our heroine was transformed by the new outfit that she was given. Lunella Nestro was perplexed and told the saint that this dress really suited her. Our heroine thanked them for lending it to her. She was in their debt. Soon Alois came up to her and told Lady Emilian that she was gorgeous. Emilian smiled and asked not to flatter her. The guy suddenly smiled and asked if he could have the honor of accompanying her. Our heroine smiled at him and said that she agreed to this proposal without a doubt. At this point, Lunella Nestro approached Lenevin and asked if he would like to be her partner. Did he remember how he had offered to accompany her last time? Due to her circumstances, she refused him then, but today, Lenevin interrupted her and shook his head, apologizing because he refuses. Lunella Nestro was in incredible shock. Emilian could not believe that Lenevin would change so much. What happened between them? Almost with tears in her eyes, Lady Nestro turned to the high priest and asked if she could find out the reason. Our heroine looked at him because she was also interested in finding out, but he in turn looked up in her direction, embarrassed. Emilian decided that he couldn't be left in trouble, so she apologized to the prince, saying that she was going out with Lenevin today. However, there was some kind of strange signal transmission error, so the guy took the words, "I will become your partner," as accept Lunella's offer. At that very moment, he sheepishly apologized and told Lady Nestro that it was an honor for him to dance with her. Our heroine, of course, was very surprised by this outcome, but still the operation to save Lenevin failed. In this case, Alois approached Emilian again and told her that he was her boyfriend for the evening. After some time, they came out into the hall, so Mrs. Emilian and His Highness Prince Alois were introduced to the people. Of course, there was no reaction to be expected. As always, all people began to look at them with contempt. Nevertheless, despite this, our heroine greeted everyone and wished everyone God's blessings to come with them. The people remained silent, and the girl thanked His Highness for keeping her company. The guy took her hand and kissed it, saying that he should be grateful to her. Seeing this, all the people began to whisper among themselves, "What is between the prince and the saint? Is it really love?" At this moment, they began to introduce His Highness Crown Prince Casadora Macron Vesiloil. Of course, all the people started clapping because they were happy to welcome the Crown Prince. In any case, they did not understand what he was doing there. Our heroine decided that he was most likely looking for Lanella, so she would not want to run into him. However, it was not possible to dodge because he noticed Emilian and stopped her. Our heroine turned around embarrassedly, asking him why he wanted to see her. The guy asked if she was implying that he needed a reason. Emilian said that was basically true, or did he think they were close enough? After these words, a dead silence hung between them. This was definitely not what Casadora Macron wanted to hear. Anyway, at that moment, Alois bowed and wished good evening to His Highness. Casadora realized that this was the same prince, so he decided that this was an interesting duet. The guy suddenly said that he heard that the emperor was going to restore the Marquis of Cheverly to his rights. Our heroine angrily asked why he brought up this topic. The prince said that it seemed to him that she did not know about this, and since she was a citizen of the empire, our heroine told him that she lived in a temple which was located on the territory of their empire. The guy asked in bewilderment what kind of nonsense this was because from the moment she dedicated herself to their state, she became a citizen of Vesiloil. Anyway, he said that although he had behaved tactlessly, they could not remove the Marquis from office because of such trifles. Our heroine asked in bewilderment if this was really a trifle. The prince asked her not to be stubborn because her consent was required to cancel the punishment. The girl certainly didn't expect the prince to talk about it so calmly in front of everyone. He was definitely making fun of her and Alois. Our heroine sighed and told him that he apparently hadn't changed at all and had come here again because of the case of the Marquis of Cheverly. She then said that if she left Vesiloil, they would no longer have to try so hard. The prince turned around in bewilderment and asked her what these words meant. Our heroine asked if she couldn't do that. The guy said she couldn't do that because saints never intermarried or left Vesiloil. In that case, Emilian smiled broadly once again and said that she would be the first. Immediately, a whole bunch of rumors and whispers appeared, asking if the saint was really leaving. What about the prosperity of the empire? Who would destroy the monsters? The prince knew for sure that he could not allow the saint to leave the empire. At that moment, Casadora Macron looked at Alois and asked if it was really his doing. The guy asked again, perplexed. Holding back his rage, Casadora Macron screamed and asked if it was really because of him, an idiot, that the saint had become like this. Our heroine immediately stood between the guys and told His Highness to calm down. She could not allow such quarrels and insults. However, the guy continued to shout and said that it was not he who should stop but them. Suddenly, a strange but loud roar was heard in the hall. What happened again? At that very moment, one of the visitors pointed upward in horror and screamed, saying that there were monsters here. Our heroine looked where the guy was pointing, and indeed she saw two pairs of red eyes in front of her watching everyone. The girl could no longer control her nerves. Already the third time in such a short period of time? Lenevin at that moment ran up to Mrs. Emilian. The guy asked if this was the work of the anti-divine sect again. Lanella Nestro, meanwhile, was asking in horror what they should do now. Our heroine told the lady to take people and take them away from here. No one should get hurt. Before the attack there was no oracle again, which was incredibly strange. Judging by the fact that the creatures have appeared in front of her for the third time, they are undoubtedly targeting her. Meanwhile, the people in the corner were asking in bewilderment how this could have happened. They prayed to the saint for help because they did not want to die. One of the guys approached the saint and asked her to destroy the monsters just like it was during the attack on the temple. Our heroine turned around and told him that unfortunately this wouldn't happen now. The guy, just like the rest of the people, looked at her in surprise and asked why. Panic began in the crowd because even the saint said that nothing would work out. Would they all die? If our heroine could, she would have finished off all the monsters long ago, but due to the enormous power of God's punishment, she cannot control it yet. At that moment, the girl noticed one of the visitors feeling ill. The girl was sitting over her mother and asking her to come to her senses. The saint immediately told Lenevin to come and help the woman. The guy ran to them and said that he would help right away. Our heroine soon grabbed her dress, thinking that she needed to pull herself together. Destroying monsters was her immediate duty. Somehow she knew that the creatures hadn't gotten to them yet, so there was still time. She approached Prince Alois and addressed him. The girl approached him and said that unfortunately she would have to borrow his dagger. However, the guy screamed and told her that it was dangerous. Our heroine asked him not to worry because she was far from a knight, but she could do something. Lenevin, as soon as he noticed that the lady had taken the dagger, asked in horror if she was really going to go out to the monsters. Emilian assumed that someone would, but also had to fight back. The guy started saying that he understood, but still. At this point, their conversation was interrupted by Prince Alois, who asked to entrust this matter to him. He would deal with them. The girl asked him if he had ever dealt with monsters. The guy said that he hadn't yet, but he was a knight, so he was sure he could handle it. In that case, Emilian smiled at him and said that she was counting on him. Soon the boy approached His Highness and asked if he could borrow his sword for a while. The prince wanted to say something, but Alois told him that he must stay in a safe place. Our heroine then approached him and asked him to hurry up if he was not going to help. The crown prince said he would be in the rear, but he still held out his sword. He told them to deal with the creatures as quickly as possible. Alois took the sword with respect and said that he understood the prince's request. Our heroine thanked Casadora for her assistance. Soon the girl turned to Prince Alois and told him that among so many people, only he dared to challenge the monster. The guy started saying that he was a prince and he couldn't tarnish the honor of his kingdom, but at that moment the monsters got tired of waiting, so they started to act. Emilian immediately asked Lenevin to create a sacred barrier that would repel their attacks. The guy said that he obeyed her. At that very moment, two huge monsters were still able to break through and soon found themselves in the hall. Of course, panic began in the hall as soon as people saw two huge monsters. Our heroine, however, immediately indicated to the creatures who their target was, so she began calling them. Of course, the monsters couldn't help but react to the girl's voice, so they turned around. Our heroine cut a piece of the dress and soon told the monsters that they were doing well, so she ordered them to continue looking at their mother. At that very moment, she tore herself away and ran towards the huge monsters who began to swing their hand. However, this game did not frighten the girl at all because she swung her blade and cut her. The giant began to scream in horror, but at that moment he began to attack with his tail. Luckily, Lenevin came to the saint's aid in time because he managed to pierce the monster's paw. Our heroine exhaled happily because they were almost done destroying these monsters. However, behind the girl, the screams of Lanella Nestro began to be heard as a huge monster advanced on her. Soon the monster's paw began to fly towards her, with which he could flatten Lady Nestro in the blink of an eye. Realizing that nothing had happened, Lanella Nestro opened her eyes and noticed the saint standing before her. The girl shielded Lady Nestro and then asked if she was okay. Lanella asked why she did that. However, there was no time for talking now because the huge monsters were still advancing. Our heroine took out her blade and instantly jumped towards the monster, plunging the blade into his body. Emilian tried to move the monster because it was too close to Lanella Nestro. At this point, the giant began to cough, which meant that this was most likely his end. Our heroine, seeing that he began to shrink, assumed that this was all. Soon her dagger fell to the ground, but Alois screamed in horror and reminded her that there was still one monster left. It was only by a miracle that the girl managed to make a dash and dodge the monster's destructive attack in time. Of course, Prince Alois immediately ran towards the monster to save Emilian. The guy pierced the giant so immediately after that, he told the saint that it was time for her to use her power. The girl ran up to the giant and literally just hugged him using her divine magic. The giant began to scream in horror, and strange smoke began to fly out of his eyes and mouth. After some time, our heroine found two monkeys on the floor that were wounded. A couple of minutes later, they came to their senses. Our heroine held them in her arms and realized that they were indeed ordinary monkeys. After everything was finally over, Prince Alois walked up to Emilian and asked who it was. Seeing the blade of the prince, the monkeys turned around. Emilian asked them not to be afraid and then said that these were baby monkeys, apparently their original appearance. In any case, the girl decided to ask the guy if he was hurt, to which Alois said that everything was fine, unlike her. Looking at her shoulder, he said that the wound looked deep and needed to be treated immediately. Lenevin approached the lady with a handkerchief and asked her to listen to the prince. He still felt very uncomfortable saying this, but since monkeys can become monsters, wouldn't it be better to kill them? Our heroine asked in bewilderment what he was talking about. She turned her head and looked into the eyes of these little ones who looked as if into her soul. The girl said that they were not monsters now, so it was impossible to kill those who were so heartlessly used. Lenevin still wanted to say something against it, but our heroine asked if he really thought she couldn't tell the difference between a monkey and a monster. She asked him not to worry because it was time to return to the temple. The boy took the cubs in his arms and said that he would carry them. Suddenly our heroine felt weakness in her legs and began to fall. Alois caught her instantly. The girl thanked him and said everything was fine. The guy said he would pretend he hadn't heard her. He then apologized, but soon after picked her up, despite Emilien's words to let her go. Then Alois told Lenevin that they had to go. The boy was confused. Some people carry monkeys in their arms, but some... However, Casadora Macron blocked their way and said that he needed to talk to Alois. The guy said that the lady needed peace. At this moment, our heroine also decided to join the conversation. She wanted to add something of her own. The girl held out the sword and thanked him for his help, but said that they had nothing more to talk about. The crown prince took back the sword and began to watch them go. Lonella Nestro, who was still recovering from what was happening, did the same. The very next morning, our heroine finally woke up. Fortunately, she was able to rest and gain strength. However, as soon as she stretched, she noticed one strange thing that she decided to check. Pulling her shirt down a little, she noticed that her shoulder was completely healed. Did she always heal so quickly? Anyway, she started to get up and wonder where the monkeys had gone. Maybe they were with Alois. As soon as she stood up and walked a few meters, a wall suddenly appeared in front of her, wishing her good morning. Alois found her himself and said that she made him very worried about her. Did she really give him a room yesterday in her half-sleep? In any case, he said that it was amazing that her wounds had healed so quickly. The girl said that everything was fine, and that was precisely why there was no need to worry anymore. By the way, she decided to ask what happened last night, or rather whether something strange happened. The guy said that overall, nothing had happened that should worry her, but the only thing was that due to his mistake, someone had spread rumors about them. Our heroine, although she asked what rumors were being discussed, still had an idea in her head. Many people never understood the format of their relationship with him, so they could have misunderstood it. At that very moment, a picture of Alois taking her in his arms appeared before Emilien's eyes. Everything became clear at once. However, at that moment, one of the priests began to run in horror to the saint and ask her for help. After some time, they followed the priest. Our heroine literally immediately asked in bewilderment what happened here. Before her, she saw incredible destruction in the garden, which happened for an unknown reason. The girl began to ask who did all this, but the priests, who did not show any particular signs of life, did not answer her. At that moment, someone alive finally addressed Emilien. It was Lenevin. Our heroine ran up to him in bewilderment and asked why he was all beaten up. The guy said that he had warned her that it was dangerous to bring them to the temple. Emilien at this point asked in horror if all this was really done by monkeys. Lenevin, with a tear in his eye, asked if she was surprised. At that moment, 2 happy monkeys appeared on the horizon and ran towards Emilien. Lenevin, perplexed, began to ask them who had allowed them to hug the mistress. The monkeys only laughed. Our heroine, however, was not as cheerful as before, so she asked them if Lenevin had told the truth. However, the monkeys again began to look at her with a look that evoked nothing but regret. Mrs. Emilien sighed and apologized to Lenevin, saying that she was apologizing for them. The guy asked not to let those shameless eyes deceive him. Scratching his head, he said that they were real monsters and she should be careful too. Our heroine laughed and told him to take the others and they should go and rest. Soon, the priests and Lenevin began to leave. Emilien asked what to do with them. Alois smiled and took one of the monkeys and asked to let him carry them. However, the monkey began to scream and soon after broke free from Alois's hand. The girl assumed that these sweet buns were scared. Alois suddenly suggested to the saint that she should change her attitude towards these animals. He reminded them that not long ago they were monsters, and it seemed to him that keeping them around was not the best decision. The girl said she agreed with him, but only partly. The guy asked why. Our heroine scratched the baby monkey's face and said that they had come to different conclusions. Exactly because the monkeys are dangerous and they simply need her supervision. After some time, they began to play with each other and run around the garden while our heroine watched them. At that moment, Alois turned to the saint and she told him to speak. The boy said that he was one of those people who would sacrifice the life of one to save two. Taking a piece of pie, he said that in such a situation, nothing would stop him. Looking at her, he asked what she would do. Our heroine said that she doesn't even know, most likely being a judge, she would sacrifice herself in the name of saving the three. However, he said that everything could change if someone truly special came into his life. The value of this person must be comparable to tens, if not hundreds of lives. Looking at her, he asked whom she would choose. The girl thought for a moment and then asked His Highness a counter question. The guy said that he would most likely have to sacrifice that special person. Our heroine was surprised. The guy in turn said that if this person is special, then he should understand his choice. The girl said that it sounds impressive. Once again, the action takes us to Emilien's room. The girl asked how many letters they had. Lenevin answered her that not counting the others, 31. After she announced that she was leaving the empire in front of the crown prince and the aristocrats, people started writing to her from everywhere. The high society is afraid that without her, they will have no one to deal with the monsters. The girl ordered all these letters to be burned. The guy said that he would obey, but taking one of the letters, he said in bewilderment that there was even a letter from the palace. Our heroine said that it was a classic because they come every day. However, Lenevin said that the sender was Uina Pervena. The girl asked again in surprise. Lenevin explained that all the children of the emperor, except for the crown prince, had this surname. Our heroine asked in surprise if the emperor really had any living descendants. It was the first time she had heard this name. However, as soon as she read the letter, her face changed to a more cheerful one. It was quite funny. Soon, she clutched the letter and said that she would never forgive it if it was true. Lenevin asked in surprise what it was. The girl told the high priest that she would explain everything a little later, so she asked him to call Jesse here because they were going to the palace. The golden letter is under a spell that only the ruling family possesses, and which accordingly only its representatives can remove. In other words, whether the content is true or not, the letter was indeed written by someone from the imperial family. After some time, our heroine Lenevin and Jesse Fautra, together with 2 monkeys, were ready to go to the palace to sort things out. After some time, Jesse Fautra asked the lady if this letter could be true. The things written in it were too cruel. Lenevin, by the way, said that even the fact that the content is too detailed is disturbing. Emilien said that if the letter is forged, the author will answer for his actions. If the phrase about the experimental human turns out to be true, the palace will suffer a great punishment. The actions of the palace have always gone beyond human understanding, and what happens there is no longer surprising. Please save me before you leave. Prince Uina's letter can't get out of her head. Emotions rage in her soul, but she tries her best not to give in to them. After some time, our heroes found themselves in the palace, and quite quickly, one way or another, our heroine began to walk past people, and Lenevin ordered them all to disperse. As soon as our heroine entered, a certain man stopped the lady and asked her to wait. He welcomed this gift from God. Emilien, nevertheless, asked where the emperor was now. The man looked down and began to say something unintelligible. Of course, Saint Emilien told him to tell it like it is, and not even think about lying to her. The man sighed heavily and said that His Majesty was now in the backyard. The girl patted him on the shoulder and said that she was grateful to the senior servant Balchain for his help. She heard that everyone who had any chance of claiming the throne was already dead. Was that child really left behind specifically to conduct experiments? The letter states that Prince Uina's birth mother was an elf, meaning that His Highness is half-elf. Thanks to their powerful life energy, elves are able to heal, so perhaps the prince is capable of this too. Emilien said that was true. He acts as a guinea pig and a home first aid kit in case someone from the ruling family gets hurt. According to the letter, Prince Uina Pervena has the ability to heal any wound. And in this situation, the palace does not really need to rely on the temple. However, the prince is still subjected to experimentation, because after the wound is removed, he cannot use his powers for some time. Lenevin said that in other words, his ability has disadvantages. Emilien angrily said that it is so as sad as it may sound. After some time, our heroine finally met face to face with the emperor, who said at the meeting that they had not seen each other for quite a long time. He assumed that she was now ready to engage in dialogue, but the girl said that she no longer intended to tolerate such treatment. The man, perplexed, said that first she was abandoning the empire. Now she didn't like his treatment. Where did all these complaints come from? Emilian sighed and assumed he didn't care at all about her words. Our heroine turned to Lenevin and asked him to call the priests and holy knights to the palace. The guy said that he obeyed her. At that moment, the emperor jumped up from his chair in bewilderment and asked what she had just said. Our heroine smiled at him and said that she hadn't said anything that he should worry about. The man still shouted and said that the palace was the territory of the ruling family, so she was violating his rights. Our heroine suddenly turned to him and asked if he had forgotten the time when he sent his knights to her temple. She does the same. Looking at him, she reminded him that the emperor had also asked her not to worry. The emperor was losing control, and soon he was shouting at her, telling her that she was comparing two completely different things. Even a saint has no right to be boss here. After such screams, the man even began to shorten his breath. Emilian nevertheless told him that she could say the same thing. It is forbidden to impose one's own rules in the temple, and even more so for people like him. At that very moment, the man took up his sword, starting to shout that she didn't dare tell him what to do. However, it was an all-too-expected move on the part of the crazy and nervous old man. At that very moment, a loud explosion sounded behind him, which smashed his chair to pieces. The emperor turned around in bewilderment, and our heroine apologized for this incident. However, she assured him that if he made her repeat herself again, she would do something worse. Soon she told Jesse and Lenevin to stay put, and that she had somewhere to go. The letter said that Prince Uina Pervena was imprisoned at the end of the Rose Road near the Scarlet Wall. The palace grounds were too large to find the prince using such a small clue. However, as if by God's help, Prince Alois, who was greeting her at that moment, falls upon our heroine. The guy said he was nearby, so he came over to tell her that if she needed help, he could help her out. She understood that her arrival had certainly caused a stir. The girl suddenly asked if the prince had seen a boy of about 12 in the palace. Our heroine said that she was talking about a child in whom the blood of a fantastic race flows. The girl was very glad that Alois was here. He could try to prove his usefulness if he really wanted to take her side. The guy suddenly said that if they were thinking about having one child, he would tell her. Our heroine smiled and asked if that meant he knew about the Road of Roses by the Scarlet Wall. Alois smiled back and said he could definitely help her. In that case, Emilian promised that in case of danger, she would promise to protect him. However, the guy turned to the saint and told her that it was not at all necessary to say this, and again, how skillfully he speaks. Another phrase to win her favor, but the guy told her that she always protects someone, but it would be nice to sometimes be in the place of the one being protected. Our heroine said that it could very well be still. If his lies bring her comfort, then it's not so bad. After a while, they were making their way through the thickets. Alois warned Emilian to be careful, because the rose bushes were enchanted. Even if you cut them off, new ones will soon sprout and spill out poison. Now, our heroine understood why they grew together like that. Anyway, the guy said that walking through them in shoes was a reckless act, so he would take her in his arms. The girl started to say that she didn't want to cause him any inconvenience, but he told her that she could consider it a way to thank her for saving people. Soon he picked her up, despite her request to stop. Then he said it was time to move on. So he began to cut down the rose bushes and at the same time hold Emilian in his hands. Our heroine understood that if they had just come in here without a knife, then trouble would have happened. Alois suddenly asked the saint to close her eyes for a second. The girl asked why, and the guy said that there were soldiers created by magic here, so he didn't want her to see the brutal scenes. Emilian then decided to agree. Alois pressed her closer to him and told her that she was smart. Soon, the battle and sounds of fighting began. Our heroine kept her eyes closed, but said that if there were monsters here, she could destroy them. The guy suggested that for this she would need to see the target with her own eyes. Emilian told him that he was right. In that case, Prince Alois told her that it was best to leave everything as it was. He explained this by saying that they were dealing with corpses that were stepping on them. He chopped them down left and right, saying that they were badly decomposed, shriveled remains that stubbornly crawled and moved. Our heroine began to apologize for leaving it to him. However, at that moment, the guy said that they were there so they could open their eyes. Emilian thanked him for his help and apologized for causing inconvenience. The guy put the girl down on the ground and said that everything was fine. Soon they looked at the building. Alois asked if this was the place she was looking for. Emilian told him that it seemed to be it. At that very moment, she saw a cheerful child behind her who was following a butterfly. Our heroine was perplexed, because this child's aura was purer than that of the priest's. This must be Prince Uena Pervena. Suddenly, the guy noticed strangers and asked in surprise who they were. There shouldn't be any strangers here. Our heroine told him that she was here at the invitation of His Highness who was suffering from illness. She asked if she could stay. The guy screamed in bewilderment and asked if this had really happened. Was it really a priestess standing in front of him? Our heroine said that she came here because of the prince's illness. The guy still couldn't believe his ears. Uena said that the professor spoke as if he could not hope to receive a reply. It turns out that it was true, he really did send her a letter. However, at that moment, Emilian was examining him and noticed something strange. When the divine power is introduced, it immediately seeps out. How deep must the wound be then? At that very moment, she lifted his sleeve and noticed the puncture marks. She knew it. In any case, Emilian asked the prince why he wrote to her. The guy said that he heard that she was leaving the empire, so he wanted to get help before she left. Anyway, he smiled, saying that he didn't expect her to answer him so quickly. He was grateful to her. Nevertheless, our heroine asked Prince Uena Pervena to tell her a little more about herself. Soon they were sitting at the table, and the boy was saying that this was the first time that someone had come here at his invitation. They couldn't imagine how surprised he was. Alois nevertheless began to turn his head from side to side and ask if there was anyone there besides the prince. Uena Pervena smiled and said that he was not a prince, so he asked to just call him Uena. In any case, he said that there are countless people here, and they are replaced about once a month. At this point, our heroine was rather surprised by the words about the prince, so she asked what it meant. The boy explained that the emperor did not consider him a human being, so he did not deserve the title of crown prince. There was a short pause between them, which was interrupted by Alois, who said that the emperor had not been mistaken after all. The boy looked at Alois in bewilderment, and he told him that it wasn't only human blood that flowed through him. The guy sighed and said that it was so, and that was why they were keeping him here. However, Alois said that he meant that Prince Uena was too beautiful to be a simple human. The boy looked at Alois in surprise. He told him that it is human nature to want to possess what he does not have. With all due respect, but His Majesty was one of those people. He just doesn't want to let Uena go from here because of her beauty. At that moment, Uena Pervena looked at the guests in surprise and asked if he could go outside just once.